The night Juniper Hartwell entered the world, the maternity ward didn't feel like a place for beginnings. It felt like a place where people made decisions they'd spend the rest of their lives trying to outrun. Wexler County Hospital sat on a hill above Cedar Ridge, West Virginia. 2 stories of beige brick, a parking lot that always needed repaving, and a lobby that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and disinfectant. The building was old enough to creak when the wind pushed against it. At 2:13 a.m., the corridor outside labor and delivery was empty except for the soft squeak of a janitor's cart and the steady beep of a fetal monitor bleeding through a half-closed door. Inside delivery room 3, the air was wet with effort. A young woman lay on the bed, drenched in sweat, her knuckles white around the handrail. Her hair was stuck to her temples. Her eyes had that wide, unblinking look that comes when the body is doing something bigger than the mind can manage. The nurse helping her round-faced patient, practiced kept her voice low and steady. "Good. That's it. You're doing it. One more push, honey. We got her." A doctor leaned in with efficient focus. A tech adjusted the light. Someone checked the clock and the baby's heart rate and then checked them again, because that's what you do in county hospitals. You trust your routine the way people in storms trust railings. Then the baby arrived in a rush of sound and motion, slippery, furious, alive. The first cry cut straight through the room. It should have been the moment where relief pours into everyone's shoulders, where the mother sobs and laughs at the same time, where somebody says, "Look at that perfect little nose." But it didn't happen like that. The young woman lifted her head just enough to see what the doctor placed on her chest. Her gaze flicked to the baby's face, and something in her expression collapsed so fast it was almost hard to register. The nurse thought for a second the mother might be fainting. But then the mother's eyes locked on the baby's right cheek. There, under the harsh delivery light, was a mark, dark, spiraled, like a thumbprint pressed too firmly into soft skin. Not a gentle blush. Not a pale strawberry patch. This looked like ink, like a small storm set on the baby's face before she even opened her eyes. The mother's breath hitched. Her hands came up, not to cradle the baby, but to push her away. "No," she whispered. The nurse leaned in, confused. "Sweetie, it's okay. It's just a birthmark. We'll have peds take a look." "No." The mother's voice rose, brittle and sharp. "Get it off me. Please." The doctor hesitated, still holding the newborn with careful support. "Ma'am, your baby is healthy. She's breathing well. I can't," the mother said, and now her eyes weren't on the baby at all. They had gone somewhere far past the ceiling tiles. "I can take her. I can keep her." A man stood near the wall, mid-30s, clean boots, dark jacket thrown over a chair like he didn't intend to stay. He had the posture of someone who'd trained himself never to look worried in public. He hadn't moved closer for the birth, hadn't taken pictures, hadn't asked for the baby's weight. He'd watched the whole thing like a person watching a weather report. When the mother turned her face away, the man exhaled through his nose and said, quietly to the nurse, "Who do we talk to for paperwork?" The nurse blinked, thrown. "Sir." "We're not taking custody," he said, as if announcing he'd decided against dessert. "We need to do this the right way." The room seemed to shrink around those words. A county hospital doesn't have a lot of glamour, but it has policies. It has forms. It has an on-call social worker who keeps a sweater in her office because the building is always freezing. It has a process for when a baby is left behind, because even if no one talks about it, it happens. Not often. But enough. The nurse stepped out, voice tight. The doctor's hands didn't stop moving, cleaning, checking, securing the newborn's airway, because you can't pause medicine for shock. The baby kept crying, a tiny furious sound, cheeks reddening, fists clenched. The mother stared at the wall like it was the only thing holding her up. "I can't," she repeated, softer now. "I can't." No one in that room knew her full story, what she'd been promised, what she'd been threatened with, what she'd been told the mark meant. They only knew what they could see, a girl too young to carry that kind of fear, and a man too calm to be ordinary. 10 minutes later, the baby was placed in a clear plastic bassinet in the nursery. Her cries turned hoarse, then thin, then silent. She lay there under fluorescent lights that made everything look tired. A clipboard appeared. The social worker arrived, hair in a messy bun, eyes still half asleep, asking questions that sounded routine but weren't. "Are you sure? You understand this is a permanent legal process. Are you under duress? Is anyone forcing you?" The mother's answers were short and flat. "Yes. Yes. No." The man signed, too quick and neat. No name was written on the baby's temporary tag. The line was left blank, like someone couldn't bear to give her anything that might stick. Just before the mother was wheeled out, the nurse, still trying, still human, asked one last time, "Do you want to hold her? Even once?" The mother's eyes flicked toward the nursery window, toward that small face with the dark spiral on her cheek. For a fraction of a second, there was something there, pain, recognition, a grief she couldn't afford. Then it vanished. "No," she said. And that was the last word anyone heard from her. At the far end of the hall, Nurse Mara Sloan stood holding a stack of charts and pretending she didn't care what happened in delivery room 3. Mara was on night shift, the kind of shift where time gets weird. Your feet hurt in a way that doesn't fully go away. The vending machine becomes your best friend and your enemy. You learn everyone's micro-expressions. The difference between "I'm fine" and "I'm about to break." The difference between a patient who wants help and a patient who's learned not to ask. She'd been with a patient in triage, an older woman with chest pain, stubborn as a fence post, when she heard the commotion down the hall. Not yelling, exactly. Just a sharpness in the air. Now, as she walked past the nursery, she caught sight of the baby through the glass. A newborn alone has a particular kind of loneliness. It isn't like an adult's loneliness. A newborn doesn't know the words for it. She only knows the absence of warmth. The absence of arms. The absence of a voice that matches the one she heard from inside the body she used to live in. The baby's tiny mouth opened as if she wanted to cry again, then closed. Her breath shuddered. Her eyes, still bluish-gray, unfocused, fluttered beneath swollen lids. Mara stopped. She had seen plenty of babies. She had seen teen moms, exhausted moms, mothers who'd fought through labor like it was a mountain and then kissed their babies like they'd found oxygen. She'd also seen moms who couldn't cope, who dissociated, who stared at the wall because the world had already taken too much and another tiny life felt like a final insult. But she'd never seen a baby left like that. One of the older nurses, someone who'd been in the building long enough to remember when the cafeteria still served pie, muttered as she walked by, "Some folks aren't meant to be parents." Another voice, lower, more judgmental, "Did you see the mark? Lord have mercy." Mara pretended she didn't hear. Her grip tightened on the charts. She started walking again. Then she stopped again. It wasn't the mark, not really. It was the way the baby's hand twitched at nothing, searching the air. Mara's chest felt tight, like somebody had zipped a coat up too fast. She told herself it wasn't her problem. She told herself there were systems. Foster placements. Paperwork. People trained for this. And then quietly, like a bruise you don't notice until you touch it, Mara remembered her own first home. A converted church basement in Roanoke. Plastic toys with teeth marks. Volunteers who meant well but never stayed. A file with her name misspelled. A social worker who smiled too brightly and called her Sweet Pea, like it could replace a mother. Mara had grown up learning that the world doesn't always catch you. Sometimes you fall and you hit the ground, and everyone shrugs like gravity is just how it is. She stared at the baby's face again, the spiral mark stark under the light, and thought, they're going to talk about her. They're going to turn her into a story before she can even hold her head up. And Mara couldn't stand it. She pushed open the nursery door. The air inside was cooler, cleaner, almost sterile.
The machines hummed.
The lights were too bright. The baby startled at the sound of the door and began to fuss again. Mara moved to the bassinet, hesitated because there are rules about touching patients who aren't yours, because the world loves rules when it wants to avoid responsibility, then slid her hands under the baby's back and lifted her carefully. The baby's body was so small it felt unreal, like holding a handful of fragile time. Mara tucked the baby against her chest. The baby's cry softened, then stopped as if her nervous system recognized the shape of safety. Mara looked down. The mark on the cheek wasn't ugly. It wasn't evil. It was just there. A swirl. A signature the body wrote on itself without permission. Mara leaned in and spoke, low enough that only the baby could hear. "Hey," she whispered. "You're okay." The baby's eyelids fluttered, heavy with exhaustion. She made a faint sound, half sigh, half question. Mara swallowed hard. Without thinking too much, because if she thought too much, she might stop. Mara carried the baby out of the nursery toward the nurse's station. The older nurse looked up, startled.
"Mara, what are you doing?"
Mara kept her voice even.
"I'm holding her."
"Why?" Mara didn't have a clean answer. Not one that fit on a form. Because she knew what it felt like to be handled, not held. Because the baby's hand had been searching air like it was drowning. Because the world had made its first choice about this child, and the choice was rejection. She said the simplest truth she could manage. Because nobody else is. The older nurse clicked her tongue.
"Don't get attached.
Social services will place her." Mara stared at the woman over the baby's head. "They'll place her somewhere," she said. "That's not the same as being wanted." A clerk at the desk, young, bored, chewing gum, glanced at the baby and then at the mark and then looked away too quickly, like superstition was something that could jump. Mara saw it. She felt something hot and stubborn rise in her ribs. She shifted the baby slightly, supporting her neck, and walked to the phone. The social worker, still in the building, still running on caffeine and obligation, answered with a tired sigh. "Wexler County, this is Jessa."
"This is Mara Sloan," Mara said.
"I'm on L&D. The baby from delivery room 3, she's been relinquished." Jessa's pause was long enough to carry regret. "Yeah. I'm working on an emergency placement." Mara looked down at the baby's face, the tiny furrowed brow, the dried vernix near her hairline. "What's her name?" Mara asked.
Another pause.
"No name listed."
Mara felt anger prick behind her eyes.
It wasn't dramatic anger. It was the quiet kind that builds a life. "She needs something," Mara said. Jessa's voice softened, just a little.
"We can assign a temporary identifier."
Mara shook her head even though Jessa couldn't see. "Not a number." Then, because she knew she might lose her nerve if she waited, Mara said, "I'll take her."
Silence.
Jessa cleared her throat. "Mara, are you saying you want to foster?" "I'm saying," Mara replied carefully, "I'm not letting her sit in a bassinet alone all night like she's a package that got delivered to the wrong address."
Jessa exhaled slowly. "You know this is complicated."
"I know. You'll need background checks." "I know. And you're a hospital employee. There are boundaries." Mara tightened her hold, feeling the baby's warmth seep through scrubs. "I'm not asking to bend the law," she said. I'm asking where to start. Jess's tone shifted into professional mode, but there was something almost relieved beneath it, like someone had been hoping for exactly this. I'm going to come up there, she said. And Mara, I need you to understand. Once you step into this, people will have opinions. Mara looked at the dim hallway. The night felt heavy with footsteps that had already happened, decisions already made. She thought about Cedar Ridge, how word traveled faster than ambulances, how folks could turn a rumor into a religion. Let them, Mara said. When she hung up, she found herself staring at the baby's cheek again. The spiral birthmark didn't look like a curse. It looked like a question. And Mara realized she was answering it with her entire body. An hour later, while Jessa filled out forms and muttered about emergency kinship exceptions and temporary custody paperwork, a doctor walked by and stopped. He wasn't old, mid-30s, dark hair falling forward when he leaned. He carried himself like someone who'd seen too much and refused to let it harden him. His badge read, Dr.
Eamon Pike, OBGYN.
He glanced from Mara to the baby, then to the paperwork on the counter. You're the one, he said quietly. Mara didn't know what to say. I guess I am. Eamon's eyes went to the baby's face. He didn't flinch at the mark. He didn't squint or look away. He studied it the way he'd study anything human, with attention, not fear. She's stable, he said. Good Apgar. Strong lungs. Mara's throat tightened. So why did she? Eamon's jaw flexed. He looked down the hall toward the now quiet delivery rooms. Some people walk into motherhood like it's a door, he said. And some people treat it like a trap.
Mara held the baby a little closer. What happens now?
Eamon's gaze returned to the baby. For the first time, the corner of his mouth lifted barely. Now, he said, she stops being nobody. Mara hesitated, then did something small that felt enormous. She took a pen from the counter, flipped the edge of a blank line on the temporary paperwork, and wrote a name in careful letters.
Juniper.
Not because it sounded pretty. Because juniper grows in rocky soil. Because it survives winter.
Because it smells clean when you crush the needles between your fingers.
Eamon watched her write it. He didn't comment. He only nodded once, like he understood the kind of promise hidden in a name. Across the nurse's station, someone murmured, That girl's gonna regret this.
Someone else said, You don't bring trouble home.
Mara kept her eyes on the baby, not on the people. Juniper's tiny hand curled around Mara's finger, weak, reflexive, unaware of the war adults were already building around her. And Mara thought, with a clarity that scared her. They left her because of a mark. Fine. Let the world be that cruel. I'll be the part of it that isn't. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The hospital doors opened and closed in the distance. Somewhere outside, the hills held their breath. Mara didn't know yet that the name Juniper would eventually end up in a courtroom. She didn't know yet that Cedar Ridge had a family powerful enough to erase a birth record the way you erase pencil from paper. She didn't know yet that the people who abandoned this baby weren't simply ashamed. They were afraid. All Mara knew was this: the baby had been born, and within minutes the world had tried to pretend she didn't belong to it. So Mara made her first choice as Juniper's mother, the kind that doesn't come with applause, only consequences. She didn't let go.
3 things happened the morning after Mara Sloan carried Juniper out of the nursery.
First, the hospital woke up and tried to pretend nothing unusual had occurred because that's what institutions do. The day shift arrived with travel mugs and puffy eyes. Someone restocked gloves. Someone complained about the copier.
Phones rang.
Charts moved. The world kept turning with the stubborn indifference of fluorescent lighting. Second, the paperwork arrived like weather. And third, the town found out. Not officially. Not through an announcement. Cedar Ridge didn't need announcements. In Cedar Ridge, news moved the way smoke moved, quiet, quick, impossible to contain. A clerk mentioned something to her cousin, who mentioned something to a neighbor, who served coffee to a hospital tech who just happened to recognize Mara in line at the pharmacy later that week. By noon, there were already versions.
Mara stole a baby.
Mara took a baby nobody wanted. Mara took a baby with a mark on her face, like a sign. By sunset, people were embellishing the mark into something it wasn't, the way folks do when they're more afraid of mystery than they are of cruelty. Mara didn't have time to be offended. She barely had time to sit. The social worker, Jessa, met Mara in a small office that smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. Jessa slid a stack of papers across the desk, tapping certain places with a pen. "This is emergency placement," she said. "It's temporary. You'll be her foster placement for now. Then we see how it goes." Mara blinked. "How it goes?" Jessa gave her a look that was half sympathy, half warning.
"You know how it goes. Background check.
Home visit. Training modules. The state wants to know you have a safe place, safe sleep, all that."
"I do."
"The state also wants to know you won't get attached." Mara's mouth tightened. That seems unrealistic. Jessa's shoulders sagged like she'd been carrying other people's heartbreak for too long. "I'm not saying it's right," she said. "I'm saying it's the system. If a relative shows up and petitions." "No relatives showed up in that delivery room," Mara replied. Jessa nodded, slow. "I know." Mara looked down at the baby in her arms. Juniper's eyes were open now, unfocused but calm. She was so small she made Mara's whole body feel oversized and clumsy, like a giant holding a sparrow. What if the mother changes her mind?" Mara asked. Jessa hesitated for a fraction too long. "That happens sometimes," she admitted. "More often, what happens is someone else changes it for her." Mara frowned. "What does that mean?"
Jessa's lips pressed together, a professional line.
"It means you keep everything documented. Every appointment. Every expense.
Every interaction.
If anyone contacts you, you write it down. Do you understand?" Mara didn't like how that sounded. She didn't like the feeling that she'd stepped into something bigger than a county hospital's normal mess. But she nodded anyway. "I understand." Jessa slid a pamphlet across the desk, Foster Care Orientation. The cover showed a smiling couple holding a toddler in a backyard that looked like a stock photo. Mara stared at it for 2 seconds and then looked away, because none of this felt like sunshine in a backyard. It felt like standing on a narrow bridge in fog, holding someone else's life with both hands. "Okay," Jessa said briskly, as if speed could make the truth less heavy. "You're still employed here, so we'll be careful about boundaries. No bringing her to the floor during your shift unless there's a true emergency and you have clearance. You'll need childcare."
Mara almost laughed.
Childcare. For an infant.
On a nurse's paycheck.
Jessa's face softened. "There are subsidies," she said. "If the placement continues, we can apply."
Mara glanced at Juniper's cheek again.
Under natural daylight through the office blinds, the spiral mark looked less like ink and more like a deep bruise that never quite faded. It was striking, yes.
Unmissable.
But the longer Mara looked at it, the less it felt like an omen and the more it felt like identity. Like something that belonged to Juniper the same way her tiny fingernails belonged to her, strange and ordinary at the same time. "I just want her safe," Mara said. Jessa stood and opened the door. "Then start with the basics," she said. "Safe sleep. Feeding schedule. Pediatrician appointment this week. And Mara." Mara looked up. Jess's voice dropped. Be prepared for people to have opinions they didn't earn. Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. She already knew. Mara lived in a modest staff apartment behind the hospital, 2 rooms, thin walls, the kind of place that kept you sheltered but never truly comfortable. The furniture wasn't hers. The couch had a tear on the armrest. The kitchen table wobbled if you leaned on it.
The window sills leaked cold air in winter.
A place designed for temporary bodies with temporary lives. Bringing a baby into it felt like trying to plant a garden in gravel. She didn't even own a crib. The first night, she lined a laundry basket with folded towels and set it beside her bed, because she'd heard room sharing reduces risk enough times for it to echo in her bones. She kept waking every 10 minutes, convinced Juniper had stopped breathing. Juniper didn't stop breathing. She just breathed like someone who didn't trust quiet yet tiny, uneven inhales, as if her body still expected to be abandoned in the dark. Mara learned Juniper's sounds quickly.
The hungry squeak. The tired whine.
The "my diaper is offensive and you need to address it immediately" yelp. Juniper had a particular little grunt she made right before she fell asleep, like a miniature complaint at the universe. Mara found herself loving that grunt more than she thought possible. She also learned what exhaustion did to the mind. At 3:20 a.m., after a bottle and a diaper and another bottle, because Juniper acted like the first one was a suggestion, Mara sat on the edge of her bed with the baby tucked against her shoulder. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the cheap fridge. Mara's eyes burned. She whispered, mostly to keep herself awake. "You're not going back in that nursery," she said.
Do you hear me? Not on my watch.
Juniper made a soft sound that might have been agreement or might have been gas.
Mara laughed quietly.
The sound surprised her. It didn't feel like joy. It felt like something inside her unfreezing. At the hospital, the reactions were immediate and messy. Some people were kind. Nurse Kit Laramie, an older L&D nurse with sharp eyebrows and a laugh like she'd smoked for 40 years, cornered Mara by the break room and shoved a bag into her hands.
"What's this?"
Mara asked. "Diapers," Kit said. "And formula samples. And some little onesies my granddaughter outgrew in a week, because babies are ridiculous like that." Mara's throat tightened.
Kit.
Kit waved her off.
"Don't get sentimental on me," she said.
"I'm not your fairy godmother. I'm just not gonna pretend a newborn deserves to be punished for the sins of adults." That sentence hit Mara right in the ribs. She nodded, unable to speak. Other people were less kind. A unit clerk stared at Juniper's cheek the way you stare at a bruise you don't want to ask about. A respiratory therapist muttered, "Lord protect us," under her breath like she was watching a horror movie. A cafeteria worker, an older woman who wore her cross necklace like armor, told Mara bluntly, "Some marks mean something. You should be careful." Mara kept her face blank. "She's a baby," she said.
"Not a prophecy."
The woman huffed. "You'll see." Then there was Dorian, one of the night security guards. Not a terrible man, not an evil one, just the kind who thought jokes were safer than sincerity. He called Juniper Spiral Girl once, loud enough for others to hear. Mara stopped walking.
Dorian es grinfaltert.
"Hey, I'm kidding."
"Don't, Mara Said, calm as ice."
You can call her Juniper. Or you can not speak about her at all.
Dorian blinked.
His laugh died in his throat. All right. All right." Mara didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She simply kept walking, Juniper's carrier snug against her elbow, like she was showing the world the shape of a boundary. The gossip didn't stop. It just learned to speak quieter.
"Doctor."
Eamon Pike remained the one constant Mara didn't know she'd needed. He didn't show up with grand declarations. He showed up with practical help, which was Mara's love language even if she didn't know it. On his next shift, he stopped at the nurse's station and placed something on the counter beside Mara's charting laptop. A small bottle of saline drops.
A pamphlet on infant reflux.
A scribbled note with a pediatrician's number. Mara looked up.
What's this?
Eamon shrugged like it wasn't a big deal, like he hadn't just made her day easier. She's congested, he said. You'll want the saline, not the medicated stuff. Babies hate it, but it helps. Mara stared at him. How do you know she's congested? Eamon's eyes flicked toward the baby carrier and away again, as if he didn't want to be caught caring too openly in a place full of watchers. I heard her breathing last night, he said simply.
It's a little noisy.
Mara felt a warmth in her chest that made her suspicious.
You were listening.
Eamon's mouth curved faintly.
I work here.
Mara knew that wasn't the whole truth. But she let it go. Later that week, she found herself on the hallway bench at 1:45 a.m. In the pediatric wing, Juniper wrapped in a blanket, fussing with a belly that wouldn't settle. Mara had clocked out an hour ago.
She could ve gone home.
Instead she sat there under the harsh overhead lights because she didn't trust her own panic yet. Eamon appeared like he'd been summoned, holding a paper cup of water. You're here late, he said. Mara stared at Juniper's face.
She won. Stop crying.
Eamon sat beside her without asking. He watched Juniper for a moment, then said, May I? Mara hesitated, then shifted Juniper into Eamon's arms. He held her like he'd done it before, firm but gentle, supporting her head without fuss, rocking in a slow rhythm that didn't demand anything from her. Juniper's cries softened, surprised into silence. Mara watched, almost angry at how easily Eamon could do what she'd been failing at for 2 hours. What did you do? She whispered. Eamon didn't look up. Nothing, he said. Sometimes they just want a different heartbeat.
Mara's eyes stung.
That's not fair. Eamon finally met her gaze. His expression wasn't pitying. It was honest. None of it is fair, he replied. But you're doing it anyway. Mara swallowed.
I don't know if I am strong enough.
Eamon shifted Juniper slightly, tucking her closer. You don't have to be strong forever, he said. Just tonight.
Then tomorrow night.
Then the next. Mara stared at him. He looked away, as if he'd said too much. But it mattered. It mattered more than Mara wanted to admit. Because Mara had grown up learning that help came with strings. Help came with debt. Help came with a smile that later turned sharp. Eamon's help felt different. It felt like someone standing beside you in the storm without trying to claim your umbrella. Juniper's early months were a crash course in survival. Mara learned how expensive formula could be, how quickly diapers disappeared, how often babies outgrew clothes like their bodies were in a hurry to become something else. She learned that sleep when the baby sleeps was advice made by people who'd never had laundry, dishes, and a job that expected you to show up with your brain functioning. She picked up extra shifts. She traded day shifts for nights because the differential pay mattered. She said yes to weekends when other nurses begged off. She worked holidays. She took overtime whenever her manager's eyes landed on her. People noticed. Some judged. Some respected. Some did both. In the staff locker room, a nurse she barely knew asked quietly, "Why are you doing this to yourself?" Mara didn't answer right away. She peeled off her scrub top and stared at her own reflection-tired eyes, hair pulled back too tight, faint shadows beneath her cheekbones. Because if she said the real answer out loud, it would sound too raw. Because this baby wasn't just a baby. She was proof that Mara could be the thing she'd never had. Mara finally said, because someone has to. The nurse shook her head, pity and disbelief mixed.
You gonna get hurt.
Mara pulled on her jacket. She already did, she said. I'm just making sure it doesn't happen twice. The birthmark kept doing what it did best, turning strangers into judges. At the grocery store, an older man leaned over the carrier and then recoiled slightly. What happened to her face? Mara's posture stiffened. Nothing happened, she said. She was born. At the pharmacy, a woman murmured, poor thing, as if Juniper couldn't hear the tone even if she couldn't understand the words.
Mara wanted to scream.
Instead, she got better at the calm response.
She is perfect, she did say.
She's healthy.
She's loved.
Loved wasn't always a feeling. Sometimes loved was an action like warming a bottle at 2 a.m. With shaking hands, like swaying on sore feet because the baby only slept if motion kept her convinced she wasn't alone. Some nights Mara sat on the floor of her apartment, back against the couch, Juniper sleeping on her chest. Mara would stare at the ceiling and feel the fear come in waves. What if the state decided she wasn't a proper placement? What if the biological mother came back? What if someone powerful wanted Juniper gone? That last thought felt irrational until it didn't. Because Cedar Ridge had families with long roots and longer reach. Families whose names were printed on plaques in the hospital lobby. Families who sponsored wing renovations, donated equipment, funded scholarships, hosted galas where people drank wine and pretended philanthropy erased their sins. One name in particular floated through town like a brand, Hartwell. The Hartwells sponsored the hospital's annual fundraiser. Their foundation's logo was on the ambulance bay sign. Their money was in the bricks even if their faces weren't in the hallways. Mara didn't know the Hartwells personally. But she knew what money did in a small town. Money didn't just buy comfort. It bought silence. It bought speed. It bought the kind of exceptions people pretended weren't exceptions. Mara told herself Juniper's situation was separate. That a birthmark didn't connect them to anybody.
Still, the name made her uneasy.
Like a distant thunder you kept trying to ignore. Juniper developed on her own schedule, stubborn about it from the start. She held her head up later than average. She rolled over like it was optional. She smiled rarely at first, as if rationing joy until she knew it was safe.
The pediatrician Dr.
Naira Bellamy, a brisk woman with curly hair and an efficient kindness, watched Juniper carefully.
She is a little delayed, doctor,
Bellamy said, voice neutral. Not alarming yet. But we'll monitor. Mara's stomach clenched. Is it because she was abandoned?
Doctor.
Bellamy didn't answer too quickly. Stress affects infants, she said carefully. But so do genetics. So does nutrition. So does luck.
You can blame yourself.
Mara nodded like she believed that. She didn't. She blamed everything herself, the mother who left, the man who signed, the world that acted like love required paperwork. But then, one afternoon in early spring, Juniper changed. Mara had spread a thick blanket on the living room floor, surrounded Juniper with soft toys, and sat nearby folding tiny socks that looked like doll clothes. Juniper was on her belly, face scrunched, the birthmark visible as she worked her fists into the fabric. Mara looked up.
Come on, Junie, she murmured.
You can do it. Juniper made a determined little sound and pushed. Her arms trembled. Her knees dug into the blanket. She rocked forward, then back, then forward again, and then, shockingly, she moved. Not far.
Barely ist gut.
But it was movement.
Mara, es breath caught.
Oh my God, she whispered, hand flying to her mouth. You did it. Juniper froze as if startled by Mara's tone. Then she grinned wide, sudden, gorgeous. It was the first time Mara saw joy hit Juniper's face without hesitation. Mara laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks, and whispered, "You did it, baby." Juniper's grin stayed, like she'd decided the world might be worth trusting after all. Months stacked onto months. Juniper learned to sit. Then to stand with a wobble. Then to clap like she'd invented applause. Mara made a game of everything because games were easier than fear. But the obstacles didn't disappear. The state required classes. Mara attended them after night shifts, half asleep in plastic chairs. A facilitator lectured about trauma and attachment, about keeping your heart open while guarding against over-identification. Mara wanted to ask what kind of person could love a child without over-identifying. She didn't ask. She just took notes. Home visits happened. A caseworker inspected electrical outlets and smoke detectors, checked that Juniper's sleep space was safe, asked Mara whether she had a support system.
Mara almost laughed at that. A support system.
She had a few co-workers who gave her diapers and side eyes. A doctor who brought saline drops. A social worker who warned her quietly. That was it. Still, the caseworker checked a box and said, "You're doing well." Mara smiled politely, and then, after the door closed, she sank to the floor and cried.
Not from sadness.
From the weight of having to prove she deserved to love someone. The birthmark became both shield and spotlight. Juniper's cheeks filled out as she grew.
Her hair darkened.
Her eyes turned a clear hazel. The spiral mark stayed unchanged, like a stamp the world refused to ignore. Some children at the park stared. Some asked questions too blunt to be cruel and too honest to be comfortable. Why is her face like that? Before Mara could answer, Juniper toddled forward wobbly, fearless, and offered the child a cracker from her snack cup. The kid accepted it, fascinated. Mara watched, stunned by the simplicity of it. Adults made the mark into a problem. Kids just noticed it and moved on. It was almost enough to make Mara hopeful. Almost. At the hospital, the administrative side began to poke its nose into Mara's life. It started with a friendly meeting. Her manager, a woman named Denise Harrow who smelled like expensive perfume and lived by the schedule like it was scripture, called Mara into the office. Denise smiled too smoothly.
Mara, how are you?
Mara sat down carefully.
Fine.
Denise folded her hands. We've been hearing concerns. Mara's pulse jumped. Concerns about what?
Denise tilted her head. Nothing official.
Just chatter. People say you're tired. Stressed. That your attention might be divided. Mara stared. I'm doing my job. Denise nodded as if impressed by Mara's calm. You are. This isn't disciplinary. This is guidance. We care about your well-being. We also care about the hospital's image. Mara's stomach went cold. My image.
Denise smiled a little wider.
You know how rumors can be. A nurse raising an abandoned infant, people talk. And if anyone starts asking questions about how the hospital handled the relinquishment.
Mara leaned forward.
The hospital handled it by leaving her alone in a nursery until I picked her up, she said. Her voice stayed steady, but the truth sharpened it.
Denise's smile faltered. Mara.
Mara held her gaze. If you're worried about the hospital's image, Mara said, you might want to focus on the people who abandoned a child, not the person feeding her at 3 a.m. Denise blinked, then recovered. I'm just asking you to be careful, she said. Don't create liability. Mara stood. Juniper isn't liability, she said. She's a person. Denise's eyes flicked downward, as if the word person made her uncomfortable. Mara walked out before she said something she couldn't take back. That night, Eamon found Mara in the hallway, shoulders rigid, chart in hand. "You okay?" he asked quietly.
Mara hesitated.
She didn't like appearing vulnerable. Vulnerability in a hospital got labeled as weakness. But Eamon's expression didn't feel like a trap. So she told him briefly about Denise. About image. About liability. Eamon's jaw tightened. "They're scared," he said. "Of what?" Mara asked.
"A baby."
Eamon's gaze drifted down the corridor, as if he could see beyond walls. "Of the wrong story getting out," he said. "Of someone asking why a child was relinquished so cleanly. Of paperwork that doesn't look right." Mara's heart thudded. "Does it not look right?" Eamon's eyes returned to hers. "Mara," he said, careful, "keep your copies. Keep your dates.
Keep every text, every voicemail. If anything feels off, tell me.
Do not handle it alone." The way he said it not made Mara feel as if he'd seen storms like this before. Mara swallowed. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Eamon's face softened, just slightly. "Because I was there," he said.
"Because I saw her come into the world."
"And because the first people who should have protected her didn't." Mara stared at him, feeling the floor tilt beneath her in a small, quiet way. Eamon added lower, "And because you're not wrong for loving her." Mara didn't trust her voice. She only nodded. The first time Juniper said something that sounded like a word, it happened on an ordinary Tuesday that should have been forgettable.
Mara came home from a double shift, shoulders aching, feet swollen.
She kicked off her shoes, washed her hands, and sank onto the couch like she might never stand again. Juniper wobbled across the living room toward her, arms out, determined. Mara lifted her without thinking, breathing in that baby smell, milk and soap and something sweet she couldn't name.
Mara murmuret, "Hey, Juni.
Mama's here." Juniper's mouth opened. Her brow furrowed with effort. Then she made a sound, uncertain, rough, but shaped.
"Mara."
Mara froze. Eamon's voice echoed in her head, "You don't have to be strong forever, just tonight." And suddenly Mara wasn't strong at all. She was a cracked open human being holding a child who had chosen her name like it was a home. Mara's eyes filled.
"Yeah," she whispered, voice breaking.
"That's me." Juniper smiled, pleased with herself, as if she'd just solved a hard puzzle. Mara kissed Juniper's forehead and cried into her hair, silently, so she wouldn't scare her. Because in that moment, Mara understood something that would haunt and guide her for the rest of her life. Juniper hadn't just been abandoned. She'd been claimed. Not by blood. Not by wealth. Not by a last name carved on plaques. By a tired nurse in a small apartment who decided that love could be a daily choice, even when the world insisted it was a privilege you had to earn. But even as Mara's world shrank into bottles, paperwork, overtime, and soft baby laughter, there were signs, small, almost invisible, that someone else had noticed Juniper too. A stranger lingering too long at the edge of the hospital parking lot, eyes on the daycare pickup area. A phone call that hung up as soon as Mara answered. A missing copy of a form that Mara swore she'd filed correctly. Each incident on its own could be nothing. Together, they formed a pattern Mara couldn't name yet. One evening, as Mara loaded Juniper into her car seat outside the staff apartment, she felt that sensation people describe in scary movies, the sense of being watched. She looked up.
Across the lot, under a flickering light, a car sat idling. Dark windows.
No visible plates from this angle. It didn't move.
Mara's skin prickled.
Juniper babbled from the seat, cheerful, unaware. Mara forced herself to breathe evenly, to buckle the straps with steady hands, to shut the door softly. Then she turned, stared at the idling car, and lifted her chin. If someone wanted to intimidate her, they would learn something quickly. Mara Sloan had been alone before. She wasn't afraid of being alone. She was afraid of letting go. And she wouldn't. The first time someone tried to purchase Juniper's life, it didn't happen in a courtroom or a backroom or some dramatic scene with sirens. It happened in the hospital lobby between the vending machines and the framed photo of the Wexler County Hospital founders, where a dusty poinsettia sat in the corner like the building was still pretending it believed in cheer. Mara had Juniper bundled against her chest in a soft carrier, the baby's cheek pressed into Mara's collarbone. Juniper was big enough now that strangers would smile at her right up until they saw the spiral mark on her right cheek. Then the smile would stall, tilt into uncertainty, and either recover into forced politeness or disappear entirely. That morning was one of the rare mornings Mara had off. She'd planned to take Juniper for her scheduled vaccines with Dr. Naira Bellamy and then swing by the grocery store on the way home, maybe even stop at the little park behind the library if the weather held. It was an ordinary plan, the kind ordinary mothers made, and Mara had started to crave ordinary the way she craved sleep. Halfway down the main hallway, as she adjusted Juniper's hat and checked the diaper bag for the third time, the call came from the hospital's internal line. "Mara Sloan?" A front desk voice asked. "Yes. There's someone here requesting you. In the lobby." Mara paused. "Do they have a name?" The voice lowered, uncertain. She didn't give it. She said it was sensitive. "She asked for you specifically." Mara's stomach tightened. There were very few people who asked for her in a hospital lobby. Most people didn't even want to make eye contact with a nurse unless they needed something urgent. Juniper stirred and made a tiny, annoyed sound like she was complaining about the pause in motion. Mara bounced her gently. "Okay," Mara said, trying to sound calm. "I'm on my way." As she approached the lobby, she felt it before she saw it, the shift in air. The way a space changes when someone brings money into it. The front desk staff sat a little straighter. Conversations lowered. A volunteer in a blue vest kept glancing toward the entrance like they were watching a slow-moving storm. The woman standing near the center of the lobby didn't fit Wexler County Hospital's usual ecosystem. She wore a dark, tailored coat that probably cost more than Mara's monthly rent. Her hair was smooth, pinned back in a way that looked effortless and still required effort. Sunglasses covered most of her face, even indoors. A small structured purse hung from her arm like it was part of her skeleton. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't curious. She was waiting. And when Mara stepped into view, the woman's head turned with precise control like a camera panning. Her gaze landed on Juniper first. Not on Mara. On Juniper. Mara's grip tightened instinctively. Juniper's birthmark was visible under the edge of her beanie, dark and unmistakable against baby skin. The woman stared at it for a beat too long, then lifted her chin slightly, as if confirming something privately. When she finally looked at Mara, her expression didn't soften. "Mara Sloan," she said. Her voice was smooth, cool, without the warmth people usually attach to babies. Mara stopped a few feet away, keeping her posture neutral. "That's me. Can I help you?" The woman took off her sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes that looked expensive, sharp, well-rested, trained to assess. Her makeup was subtle but exact. Her face was the face of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. "I'm here on behalf of Juniper's biological family," she said. Mara didn't move. She didn't blink. Juniper made a soft coo, unaware that her name had just been spoken like a claim. Mara's voice came out steady, but she felt her pulse hammering. Her biological family relinquished her. The woman's lips pressed into something that might have been a smile if it had any kindness in it. Families do what they must in complicated circumstances. She was abandoned, Mara replied, sharper now. There's nothing complicated about that. The woman's eyes flicked briefly toward the front desk, where two employees had suddenly become very busy arranging papers that didn't need arranging. She lowered her voice. You've done a great deal, she said, like she was complimenting a waitress. And you've been compensated, I'm sure, in some form. Mara's stomach turned. I haven't been compensated for anything. The woman nodded as if Mara's words were a minor inconvenience. Still.
You invested time,
Energy. Emotion. Mara's jaw clenched. Get to the point. The woman reached into her purse and withdrew a white envelope. Not thick enough to be a contract.
Thick enough to be money.
She placed it gently on the edge of a nearby table, near a bowl of peppermints. We'd like this to end quietly, she said. No conflict.
No embarrassment.
No strain. Mara stared at the envelope without touching it.
What do you want?
Mara asked, though she already knew. We want you to sign a voluntary relinquishment of any informal claim you may be attempting to establish, the woman said. Juniper will be placed in a stable, appropriate environment. With resources. With a proper family name. Mara felt heat rush up her neck. A proper name, she repeated. You mean the name that left her blank on her wristband? The woman didn't flinch. You're emotionally attached. That's understandable. But emotions do not outweigh realities. Mara shifted Juniper slightly, as if bracing her in case the woman tried to reach forward. Reality is she was left in a nursery alone. The woman's gaze stayed fixed, unbothered. Reality is you do not have legal guardianship. Mara's throat went tight. She's placed with me through the state. Temporarily, the woman corrected. And temporary arrangements can be revised. The way she said revised made it sound like editing a document, not uprooting a child. Mara kept her voice controlled. If her mother wants her, she can petition properly. She can show up herself. The woman's eyes narrowed by a fraction. Her mother is not in a position to do anything, she said. That is not your concern. Mara's heart stumbled. Not in a position, what does that mean? The woman's expression didn't change, but her tone sharpened, as if she'd decided the nice version of the conversation was done. It means you have a choice, she said. You can sign. You can accept that you've done a charitable thing and step back. You can return to your career and your quiet life. And if I don't? The woman's gaze didn't leave Mara's face. Then your life will become inconvenient, she said softly. Your employment will become uncertain. Your reputation will become a topic. Mara felt the lobby tilt, not physically, but emotionally, like the floor under her beliefs had cracked.
Juniper made another little sound.
Mara focused on it, on the tiny weight of her, on the way her breath warmed Mara's chest. The baby was real. Everything else was manipulation. You're threatening me, Mara said. The woman smiled finally, and it was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. I'm informing you, she replied. People with less sense than you have made worse choices over smaller matters. Mara took a single step closer, keeping Juniper between them like a shield.
Say your name, Mara demanded. If you here legally, tell me who you are.
The woman's eyes flicked downward to Juniper's cheek again, as if the mark was the only thing worth acknowledging. I'm not required to give you anything, she said. You'll be contacted through proper channels. Then she leaned in, just slightly, close enough that her perfume something clean and cold made Mara's stomach turn. Consider what it means to fight people you do not understand, she murmured. Maura's voice came out low, vibrating with controlled fury. Consider what it means to bully a nurse holding an infant. The woman straightened, slipped her sunglasses back on, and walked away without another word, heels clicking across the lobby tile like punctuation. The envelope remained on the table. Maura didn't touch it. Not because she was noble. Because touching it felt like contamination.
After the woman disappeared through the automatic doors, Maura stood frozen for a beat. The lobby noises came back in slowly phones, footsteps, the faint jangle of keys, the vending machine humming.
It was all too ordinary for what had just happened. At the front desk, the clerk finally looked up. Her eyes were wide, guilty. "Maura," she said quietly, "I'm sorry." She said it was urgent. Maura forced herself to nod, because she didn't have the energy to comfort anyone else's conscience. She turned and walked toward the pediatric wing with Juniper pressed close, her mind racing. Biological family. Proper name. Her mother is not in a position. Reputation will become a topic. Maura felt something she'd tried not to feel since the very first night, fear. Not fear of hardship.
Fear of power.
Because whoever that woman was, she hadn't come with love. She'd come with ownership. That evening, Maura tried to convince herself it would end there. People like that didn't usually show up in person unless they thought intimidation alone would work. It was a tactic. A test. They expected her to fold. She didn't fold. She fed Juniper. She gave her a bath in the tiny tub. She changed her into soft pajamas with little moons on them. She read the same board book twice because Juniper liked chewing the corner more than listening. She rocked her until she fell asleep. Then Maura sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open and her hands shaking. She did what she'd learned to do in nursing, document. She wrote the date, the time, the location,
a description of the woman.
The exact words as best as she could remember. She noted the envelope and that she hadn't touched it. When she finished, she printed the page and put it into a folder, an ordinary manila folder that suddenly felt like a weapon. She was sliding the folder into a drawer when her phone buzzed.
Unknown number.
Maura stared at the screen, then answered anyway because in small towns, not answering sometimes makes it worse. "Hello."
Silence.
Maura's throat tightened. "Who is this?" The call ended. Her phone buzzed again, immediately, this time a text.
A photo loaded. Maura's blood ran cold.
It was Juniper.
At the little park behind the library.
In her yellow hat.
In Maura's arms.
The angle was wrong. Not from a nearby mom.
Not from a random passerby.
It was from a distance, zoomed in, hidden. Beneath the photo were 5 words. "Let go while you can." Maura's hands went numb. Her skin prickled. She looked toward the window as if she could see through the night. Outside, the parking lot was dark. The staff apartment building sat quiet. A distant car passed on the road like nothing mattered. Juniper breathed softly in her crib laundry basket beside the bed, unaware that someone had just reached into their life. Maura took a slow breath and forced her mind to work.
She screenshot the message.
She saved it. She emailed it to herself. She printed it. Then she did the thing she hated most. She called Eamon. He answered on the second ring, voice tired.
"Maura."
"I need you," Maura said, and hated the crack in her voice. There was a pause, only half a second, but it felt like a door opening. "Talk to me," Eamon said. Maura told him everything, the lobby, the envelope, the words, the photo. She kept her voice steady until she got to the text. "I didn't see anyone," she whispered. "But they saw us." Eamon's tone turned hard in a way Mara hadn't heard before. Do not delete anything, he said. Do not respond to them. And do not be alone tomorrow. Mara swallowed.
I am always alone.
You're not, Eamon corrected. Not starting now. There was movement on his end like he'd stood up, like he was pacing. Mara, he said, this isn't random. The way she talked, those are people who think in terms of control. Mara's chest tightened. What kind of people? Eamon didn't answer immediately, and that delay terrified her more than any words.
Eamon, Mara presset. What do you know? He exhaled slowly.
I know that some births here are protected, he said carefully. Private deliveries. VIP situations. I've seen money rewrite procedure. Mara's stomach dropped. Juniper is connected to that. Eamon's voice lowered. I don't know yet, he said. But you're going to treat it like she is. Mara's eyes burned. What do I do? Eamon didn't hesitate. Tomorrow, you file a report with Jessa, he said. You make sure it's in the system.
And you give me copies of everything.
Also marriage it a second set of copies somewhere not in your apartment.
Mara's lips parted.
Like where? Safe place, he said. A lockbox.
A trusted person.
A lawyer.
Mara laughed once, hollow.
A lawyer. On my budget. Eamon's voice sharpened. I'll help you find one.
Mara closed her eyes.
Why are you doing this? She asked again, because the question still didn't feel safe. Eamon's reply came softer, but unwavering. Because I watched her get left behind, he said. And because if someone is trying to erase her again, I'm not letting it happen. Mara opened her eyes and stared at Juniper sleeping. The baby's face looked peaceful, innocent, almost glowing in the dim light. Mara whispered, more to herself than to Eamon, she's just a baby. Eamon's voice was quiet. That's why it's unforgivable. The next week moved like a trap tightening. At first, the pressure came in small, deniable ways. A form Mara had submitted to HR went missing, and she was told she'd have to redo it. A time-off request she'd filed months ago suddenly became unapproved. Her manager Denise Harrow began asking pointed questions about Mara's emotional capacity and whether Mara had support. A co-worker she'd once considered friendly started avoiding her in the break room. People stopped offering to swap shifts. Mara walked the halls and felt eyes on her, not warm eyes, not curious eyes, but measuring ones. Then the hospital got a notice. Not from the state foster care office. From the state health department. An administrative compliance audit scheduled within days. It wasn't unheard of. But it was unusual in its timing and speed. Audits took months to arrange. This one appeared like a bird of prey dropping out of the sky. Eamon read the notice, jaw tight. This is connected, he said. Mara swallowed. They're auditing the hospital because I kept a baby?
Eamon's eyes held hers.
They're auditing the hospital because someone wants leverage, he said. If the hospital feels threatened, they'll look for a way to remove the threat. Mara's skin went cold. And I'm the threat. Eamon's gaze didn't soften with sympathy. It hardened with resolve. No, he said.
You re the scapegoat.
2 days later, Mara arrived for a shift and found an email waiting in her inbox. Mandatory meeting with HR. The subject line felt like a fist. In the HR office, Denise sat with a woman from administration. Mara didn't recognize tight bun, crisp blazer, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. The administrator spoke first. Mara, we're checking in, she said. There have been concerns raised regarding your well-being. Mara kept her voice neutral. What concerns? Denise folded her hands. "We've received anonymous communications," she said, "stating you may be experiencing emotional instability. That you may be," she glanced at the paper like she didn't want to say it aloud, "delusional about your role in a child's life." Mara's throat constricted. Delusional. The administrator smiled faintly. "It's likely nothing," she said, "sweet as poison. But because you work with vulnerable populations, we take all reports seriously." Mara's hands curled in her lap. "Who reported this?" "We can't disclose," Denise replied quickly. Mara stared at them, a slow fury building. "So someone can accuse me of mental illness anonymously and you call me in like I'm a problem," she said. "But when I report being threatened, nobody calls anyone in."
Denise's smile slipped. "Threatened?" Mara leaned forward.
"Yes," she said. "A woman came to the lobby, offered money for custody, then I received surveillance photos of my foster child with a warning." The administrator's eyes flickered just a tiny flash of surprise or calculation. "Do you have proof?" she asked. Mara's voice was hard. "I documented it. I saved the messages." Denise cleared her throat. "Mara, you understand how serious it is to make claims like that." Mara cut her off. "And you understand how serious it is to imply I'm unstable because I refuse to hand a baby to strangers." The administrator's smile returned, thin. "We'll note your statement," she said. "In the meantime, we're recommending you take a brief leave during the audit period." Mara's pulse spiked. "Leave? Unpaid?" Denise looked down. "We'll explore options." Mara stood. The chair legs scraped the floor like a warning. "You're trying to isolate me," Mara said quietly. "If I am not here, if I am not working, if I am labeled unstable, then I lose credibility." Denise's eyes widened. "Mara." Mara grabbed her bag. "I'm done talking," she said. "All communication goes through the social worker and my attorney." Denise blinked. "Your attorney?" Mara didn't have an attorney yet. But she would. Because that was the moment Mara understood something with brutal clarity. They weren't just trying to take Juniper. They were trying to break Mara's ability to fight for her. That night, Mara did not sleep. She moved through her apartment like a person cleaning up after a storm, gathering papers, copying documents, scanning everything, labeling files. She wrote down every date she could remember, Juniper's placement, every pediatric appointment, every home visit, every training class. She printed email threads. She printed her own notes. She printed the threat text again and again, like paper could become armor if there was enough of it. Then she called Jessa and insisted on filing an official report. Jessa arrived the next day with a tired face and a folder. When Mara showed her the photo message, Jessa's expression changed. "This is not okay," Jessa said quietly. Mara laughed once, sharp. "No kidding." Jessa looked at Juniper, who was playing on the floor with a plastic spoon like it was the greatest invention on earth. Jessa's eyes softened, then hardened. "I'm escalating this," Jessa said. "And Mara, listen to Mado, not meet anyone alone. If someone contacts you, you tell me. If someone shows up, you call the police. Even if it feels dramatic." Mara's voice broke. "I don't want to be dramatic. I just want her safe." Jessa nodded, grim. "Power thrives on people who don't want to make noise," she said. "Make noise." After Jessa left, Eamon called with a name. "Orson Creed," he said. "Family law. Not flashy. Not cheap, but he's not owned by anyone in this county." Mara swallowed. "How do you know him?" Eamon paused. "He handled a case for a nurse friend of mine years ago," he said.
He doesn't scare easy.
Mara stared at Juniper, who had fallen over and giggled at herself, delighted by gravity.
Okay, Mara whisperet. I'll call him.
The call to Orson Creed felt like stepping onto a stage without a script. His office was in a low brick building near the courthouse, across from a diner with peeling paint. Mara could practically smell old coffee through the phone line. Orson's voice was calm, gravelly, not unkind.
MS.
Sloane, he said.
Tell me what is happening.
Mara told him everything. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then Orson asked a question that made Mara's stomach drop. Do you have the original relinquishment paperwork? He asked. Mara blinked.
No.
The state has it, I think.
The hospital has copies.
Orson's voice turned sharper. Get your hands on every copy you can, he said. And make copies of those copies. Because if someone wants custody, the first thing they do is manipulate the paper trail. Mara's mouth went dry. Can they do that?
Orson exhaled.
They can try, he said. And in a small town, trying sometimes looks like succeeding until someone forces sunlight onto it.
Mara's hands trembled.
What do I do right now? Orson's answer was blunt. You stop operating like this is a custody disagreement and start operating like this is a containment effort, he said. Someone wants the child moved quietly. That means you are in danger of being labeled the problem.
Mara's eyes stung.
They already started. Then we move fast, Orson said. We establish your pattern of care.
We secure your evidence.
We prepare for a petition. Mara's voice went small. A petition from who? Orson paused, as if choosing his words. From whoever sent the woman in sunglasses, he said. And I suspect that's not an ordinary family. Mara's throat tightened. Juniper's mother hasn't contacted me once. Orson's voice softened slightly. Sometimes mothers aren't allowed, he said. Sometimes mothers are the first victims. Mara stared into space. The woman's words echoed again. Her mother is not in a position to do anything.
Mara whisperet, oh my God.
Orson continued, I'm not saying that to scare you, he said. I'm saying it so you understand what kind of chessboard you're on. Mara swallowed. Okay, she said, forcing steadiness into her voice.
Tell me where to stand.
Orson's reply was immediate. Between the child and anyone who tries to move her without transparency, he said.
And you document every step.
When the call ended, Mara sat on her couch holding Juniper and felt the weight of the world settle into her bones.
She wanted ordinary.
Instead, she'd been handed a fight. The next blow came faster than she expected. One morning, Mara went to the hospital records office during her lunch break, hoping to obtain copies of the relinquishment paperwork and initial newborn records just in case, just to be safe. The records clerk, a bored-looking man with a mustache and a coffee-stained lanyard, tapped at his computer and frowned. That's weird, he said. Mara's heart rate spiked. What's weird? He clicked again. The file isn't here, he said. Mara felt cold spread through her limbs. What do you mean it isn't here? The clerk shrugged. It should be in the system. It's showing as archived, but he clicked, then frowned harder. The scanned copy is missing. Like the attachment is gone. Mara's mouth went dry. Can you pull the physical file? The clerk stood, disappeared into the back room, and returned 10 minutes later with empty hands. No physical file, he said. Or it's been pulled. Mara's voice came out harsh. By who? He lifted his palms helplessly. No log on my end. Could be compliance. Could be admin. Could be.
Mara cut in, shaking.
That file was here last month. The clerk looked uncomfortable. Then it's not here now. Mara walked out of records with her lungs burning, as if she'd sprinted. The sun outside looked too bright. People walked to their cars. A couple laughed near the entrance. Mara wanted to grab someone by the shoulders and scream, "Do you understand what's happening?" Instead, she went straight to Eamon's office. He took one look at her face and stood. "It's gone," Mara said.
The newborn record. The relinquishment scan.
Missing. Eamon's eyes went dark. "Okay," he said, voice controlled. "That confirms it."
Mara's voice cracked.
"Confirms what?" "That someone with access is touching the file," Eamon said. "And that means this isn't just a family wanting a child. This is someone managing risk."
Mara's hands shook.
"What risk?" "She's a baby." Eamon's jaw tightened. "Exactly," he said. "Babies don't create risk.
Secrets do."
Mara stared at him, terror and anger mixing. "What are they hiding?" Eamon looked at her for a long moment, then spoke carefully. "I don't know," he said. "But I know this: if they're erasing paperwork, they're preparing to move Hira to discredit you." Mara swallowed. "How do I stop that?" Eamon's voice turned firm. "By getting ahead of them," he said. "By making sure your documentation exists outside this building." Mara nodded, numb. "I already made copies." "Good," Eamon said. "Now we make sure the right people see them."
Mara's eyes stung.
"Who are the right people?" Eamon's gaze held hers. "People who can't be bought by a plaque in the lobby," he said. 2 days later, the official notice arrived. Not by phone. Not by a rumor. By certified mail. Mara stood in her kitchen holding the envelope while Juniper babbled in her high chair, smearing mashed banana across the tray like she was painting a masterpiece.
Mara's fingers trembled as she tore the envelope open.
The first line made her vision blur. "Petition for emergency custody review." Her breath caught. The room seemed to narrow. The petition didn't name the biological mother directly. It named a family representative and a concerned relative seeking appropriate placement. It cited unregulated custody, potential psychological instability, and unsafe environment due to lack of legal permanence. They were building the story.
Not the true story. The convenient one.
Mara's hands shook so hard she almost dropped the paper.
Juniper squealed happily, oblivious.
Mara stared at her foster daughter, her child, in every way that mattered, and felt something inside her lock into place.
Fear still existed.
But beneath it, something stronger grew. A refusal. A promise. Mara picked up her phone and called Orson Creed. When he answered, Mara didn't waste time. "They filed," she said. Orson's voice stayed calm, but it sharpened. "Read it to me," he said. "Every word that matters." Mara looked down at Juniper's face, food on her chin, eyes bright, birthmark visible, alive. And as Mara began reading, she understood exactly what this was now.
Not a misunderstanding.
Not a negotiation. A removal. And Mara was no longer just a nurse trying to do a good thing. She was an obstacle. Which meant she had one job that mattered more than shifts, more than reputation, more than the hospital's approval.
Hold the line.
Because if she didn't, Juniper would disappear into a proper name that had already proven it could erase a baby like she was a mistake. By the time the emergency petition showed up in Mara's mailbox, she'd already learned the most dangerous truth about power in a place like Cedar Ridge: it didn't need to kick down your door. It only had to convince everyone else to close theirs. Mara didn't cry when she read the petition. She didn't collapse. She didn't call her mother. There wasn't a mother to call. She didn't call a friend because friends were what people claimed to be until the moment your name became inconvenient to say out loud. She sat at her wobbly kitchen table while Juniper banged a spoon against her high-chair tray like she was auditioning for a tiny percussion section. Mara stared at the black and white letterhead and felt a calm settle over her that wasn't peace at all. It was focus. The petition was written in the language of respectable harm. Concerned party, best interests, stability, appropriate environment. It never said what Mara knew it meant. It never wrote the real sentence. Hand her over quietly. Orson Creed met Mara the next morning in his office across from the courthouse. His building was the kind of place that had survived 3 different paint schemes and still smelled faintly of dust and coffee. A framed photo of a fishing boat hung slightly crooked in the waiting area, like someone had once tried to make the room feel less like a place where hope got negotiated. Orson wasn't flashy. He wore a rumpled button-down and carried a legal pad like it was an extension of his spine. His eyes looked tired in the way of people who had listened to too many families fracture and still showed up anyway. He didn't ask Mara how she was doing. He asked, "Do you have your documentation with you?" Mara slid a folder across his desk, thick, organized, labeled. Copies of Juniper's placement paperwork. Pediatric appointment summaries. The screenshot of the threat text with the park photo. Notes from the lobby encounter with the woman in sunglasses, written with timestamps and details. Orson flipped through everything slowly, like he was reading The Shape of a Storm. "This is good," he said finally. "You're doing the right thing." Mara's throat tightened. "It doesn't feel like it." Orson tapped his pen once. "That's because the right thing rarely feels safe when someone else benefits from you doing the wrong thing." Mara stared at the petition again. "They're calling me unstable." "They're laying groundwork," Orson said. "That's standard." "Standard for who?" Mara snapped. "Normal families don't send someone to a hospital lobby with an envelope of hush money." Orson's eyes stayed steady. "Then we stop treating them like a normal family." He leaned back, palms flat on his desk. "Mara, listen closely," he said. "Courts love paper trails. People with resources love controlling paper trails. We're going to do 2 things at the same time. 1. Build a clean record of your care and your stability that's impossible to ignore. 2. Force the other side to explain why they showed up like an organized operation instead of, a mother coming with a tearful apology." Mara's voice went small. "Do you think her mother is even allowed to come?" Orson's gaze softened by a fraction. "I don't know," he said. "But I've seen cases where the mother wasn't the one steering." Mara swallowed. The lobby woman's words returned like a cold hand at the back of her neck. Her mother is not in a position to do anything. Orson glanced at the screenshot again. "This photo is the part one don't like," he said. Mara's stomach tightened. "Because it's stalking." "Because it's a message," Orson corrected. "And messages like this are meant to do one thing: make you isolate. Make you feel crazy. Make you second guess your own reality." Mara's hands clenched. "I am not crazy." "I know," Orson said. "But we're going to behave like the court might not, until we make it impossible for them to pretend." He slid the petition toward her. "We have a hearing date," he said. "We'll respond. But I want more than defense. I want offense." Mara blinked. "Offense?" Orson nodded. "We find out who's behind this concerned relative. We find out how they got your number. How they got that photo. How they knew where you'd be." Mara stared. "How?" Orson's mouth tightened. "By doing something you've been trying not to do," he said. "What?" Orson looked her dead in the eyes. We make noise, he said. Noise in Cedar Ridge had consequences. Mara learned that the week she started asking questions. She didn't start with the Hartwells. She started with the hospital, because that was where Juniper had been born, and that was where the paper was disappearing. Eamon met her after his shift ended, in a quiet corner by the old chapel room that no one used except visiting pastors and nurses who needed to breathe without being watched. He looked more tired than usual. There were faint shadows under his eyes, the kind you didn't get from missed sleep so much as from carrying too much restraint. "The records clerk told you the file was missing?" he asked.
Mara nodded. Scan attachment gone.
Physical file pulled. No log. Eamon's jaw flexed. "There's always a log," he murmured. "If there isn't, it's because someone wanted it not to exist."
Mara's voice shook.
"How can they do that without leaving fingerprints?" Eamon looked down the hallway, then back at her. "You'd be surprised what people can do with the right access and the right fear," he said.
"Fear of what?" Mara demanded. Eamon's eyes held hers.
"Fear of donors," he said quietly. Mara's stomach sank. "Eamon, is this about the Hartwells?" Eamon didn't answer immediately. That pause was its own answer. Mara felt her pulse hammer. "Say it."
Eamon exhaled slowly.
"The Hartwells fund half the upgrades in this building," he said. "That doesn't mean they control it. But it means people try very hard not to upset them." Mara's voice rose despite her effort to keep it down. "They abandoned a baby. Why would anyone protect them?" Eamon's gaze went distant, like he was watching a scene in his head. "Because whatever happened that night wasn't treated like an abandonment," he said. "It was treated like a situation." Mara's throat tightened.
"You were there."
Eamon nodded once. "I was an intern," he said. "And I got pulled into a delivery that wasn't on the board." Mara felt cold spread through her chest. "Not on the board."
"No name."
"No standard admission," Eamon continued. "A patient was escorted through a side corridor. Security posted outside the door. The attending physician that night wasn't our usual rotation." Mara's nails dug into her palms. "Juniper's mother." Eamon swallowed. "I didn't know her name then," he said.
"I remember her face. Young.
Terrified. Like someone had already decided her life and she was trying to survive inside the decision."
Mara's voice cracked.
"And after she gave birth?" Eamon's mouth tightened. "There was a phone call," he said. "I heard someone say, 'The chairman will want to know.'" Then he stopped, jaw tight. "Then the baby was moved out fast." Mara's lungs burned. "Moved out where?" Eamon looked at her. "Into the nursery," he said. And then his eyes flicked to Juniper's photo in Mara's folder.
"Into your arms."
Mara stared at him, shaken. "Why didn't you tell me?" Eamon's voice was low. "Because I didn't have proof," he said. "Because hospitals are full of people who know things they can't prove. And because the minute you accuse power, power starts building your obituary." Mara whispered, "They're doing that to me already." Eamon nodded. "Which is why I'm done staying quiet," he said. Mara searched his face. "What are you willing to do?" Eamon hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded page.
"Handretten."
"Dense. I started writing everything I remember," he said. "Times, faces, who was on call. It's not enough alone, but it's a start. And if I sign it as a statement." "You could lose your job," Mara said. Eamon's eyes didn't move. "I know." Mara's throat tightened. "Why would you risk that?" Eamon's expression softened, not into sentimentality but into something steadier. Because I watched a baby become a problem to solve, he said. And then I watched you turn her into a person. If they take her again, they don't just erase her. They erase the idea that anyone can stand up to them.
Mara's voice shook.
So we fight. Eamon nodded once. So we fight. That afternoon, Mara went to the county library, because in small towns the library is where the past waits quietly for someone brave enough to read it. The Cedar Ridge Public Library had a children's corner filled with worn picture books and a mural of a bluebird that looked like it had been painted by someone who believed in happy endings. Mara sat Juniper on her lap and gave her a soft toy while she scrolled through the digital archives of the Cedar Ridge Gazette. She searched for Hartwell. Thousands of results. Gala photos. Scholarship announcements. Hospital donations.
Groundbreakings.
Ribbon cuttings. Smiling people holding oversized checks. Mara's stomach turned. She refined the search.
Hartwell daughter.
That's when she found the older stories buried under years of good press like bones under fresh soil. A headline from 26 years ago, heiress Celeste Hartwell steps away for health reasons. Another, Hartwell family requests privacy after incident. The articles were vague. Carefully vague. The kind of vague that meant somebody's lawyer had edited the truth into mush. Still, the dates jumped out at Mara. Celeste Hartwell stepped away from public view for months. Then she returned briefly. Then she vanished again. And 9 months after the second vanishing there was a quiet gap where the paper printed nothing about her at all. Mara's hands went cold. She looked down at Juniper, who was chewing the ear of a stuffed rabbit like it was serious work. Juniper's cheek mark was visible, dark and spiraled and stubborn. Mara typed, Celeste Hartwell pregnancy.
Nothing direct.
Because of course not.
So Mara searched something else. Celeste Hartwell Clinic.
A small society column item appeared, Hartwell Family Fund's Women's Health Initiative. It named a private facility outside Cedar Ridge Hartwell funded, discreet, elite care. Mara leaned back, heart pounding.
A private facility. A women's health initiative.
A private delivery not on the board. It fit too well. That night, Mara printed the articles and stacked them in her folder like evidence of a story nobody wanted told. Orson said he wanted offense.
Mara was ready.
The next piece came from someone who didn't want to be found. A retired nurse named Gloria Vance. Mara didn't find Gloria through a neat search or a directory. She found Gloria through the same messy network that spread gossip because gossip and truth often lived in the same pipes. Mara asked one older L&D nurse who used to work nights back then. That nurse sucked in air through her teeth and said, "If you're asking about that, you need Gloria," and then refused to say anything else. It took Mara 2 more days to get an address. Gloria lived in a small house on the edge of town where the pavement broke into gravel and the trees grew close enough to make you feel watched even when nobody was there. Her porch had wind chimes that clinked softly, like nervous laughter.
A faded "No trespassing" sign hung crooked near the door.
Mara showed up anyway, Juniper strapped against her chest. She knocked. No answer.
She knocked again, louder. Still nothing.
Mara turned to leave, then the door creaked open a few inches.
A woman's voice came out, rough.
"Who told you where I live?" Mara froze.
"My name is Mara Sloan," she said. Silence.
"Then, I know who you are." Mara swallowed. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because someone is trying to take Juniper." The door opened a little more. Gloria Vance was in her 70s, hair gray and pulled back tight. Her eyes were sharp, suspicious, exhausted. She looked like someone who'd spent years refusing to be frightened into submission and had paid for it with her peace. Her gaze dropped to Juniper's face.
And Mara saw it the exact moment the birthmark landed in Gloria's memory.
Gloria's hand tightened around the doorframe. "Oh," she whispered, like she'd been punched in the chest. "It's her."
Mara's breath caught.
"You recognize it?" Gloria's eyes flicked to Mara. "Don't say anything else out here," she snapped. She yanked the door open and motioned Mara inside quickly, as if the air itself had ears. Gloria's house smelled like black coffee and old paper. The living room was crowded with Afghans, framed photos, and stacks of magazines.
A crucifix hung on the wall beside a faded nurse's cap in a shadow box like a relic.
Gloria didn't offer Mara tea. She didn't ask how Juniper was. She stood in the middle of the room with her arms folded, staring at the baby like she was seeing a ghost walk back into town. "You shouldn't have brought her here," Gloria said finally. Mara's heart pounded. "Why?" Gloria's jaw tightened. "Because some people don't forget," she said. "And they don't forgive."
Mara held Juniper closer.
"I'm already in it," she said. "They found us. They sent photos. They filed petitions. They're calling me unstable."
Gloria's mouth twisted.
"That's how they do it," she muttered. Mara swallowed. "Who?" Gloria's gaze snapped to Mara. "Don't pretend you don't know," she said.
"The Hartwells."
Mara's throat tightened.
"Tell me what you know."
Gloria shook her head once, hard, like she was trying to shake off decades.
"I promised," she whispered.
"Promised who?" Mara pressed.
Gloria's eyes flashed. "Promised myself," she snapped, "that I'd live long enough to die in peace."
Juniper made a small noise, restless. A frown creased her tiny face.
Mara rocked gently.
"I'm not asking for drama," she said quietly. "I'm asking for truth. Because truth might be the only thing that keeps her from being erased again." Gloria stared at Juniper. Her eyes softened just a crack.
"You don't understand what you holding," Gloria said. Mara's voice trembled.
"Then explain it." Gloria walked to a cabinet, opened it, and pulled out an old photo envelope. Her hands shook slightly as she dug through it. Finally, she pulled out a photograph faded, printed on glossy paper, the kind people used to keep in albums. She held it out. Mara took it with careful fingers. It showed a young woman lying in a hospital bed, eyes closed, hair dark against a pillow. She looked drugged, pale. Beside her, barely in frame, a newborn's face appeared tiny, wrinkled. And on the newborn's right cheek was a dark spiral mark. Mara's breath left her in a rush. "Oh my God." Gloria's voice came out low and shaking. "I was on that shift," she said. "I shouldn't have been. They pulled me in because I knew how to keep my mouth shut." Mara looked up, horrified. "They told you to keep your mouth shut?" Gloria's eyes burned. "They didn't have to say it," she said. "They showed it. Security. Lawyers. A man in a suit who didn't wear a badge but everyone treated him like he owned the building." Mara's stomach clenched. "Eamon said there was a phone call." Gloria nodded slowly. "There was always a call," she whispered. "To the chairman."
Mara's hands trembled around the photo.
"Celeste Hartwell," she said. Gloria flinched at the name like it was a curse. "Yes," Gloria said. "Her." Mara's voice went soft. "Was she willing?" Gloria's eyes filled with something like grief. "She was terrified," she said. "Not of labor. Of them." Mara's throat tightened. "Who is them?" Gloria's jaw clenched. Her family, she said. Her father. The people around him.
The ones who treat a woman like an asset.
Mara stared at the photo again. Why did they take the baby? Gloria looked away, toward the window as if she expected to see a black SUV parked outside. Because the baby wasn't supposed to exist, she said. Because the baby proved something happened that they didn't want on paper. Mara whispered, "What happened?" Gloria swallowed. Celeste was kept out of sight, she said. They said health retreat. Recovery. Privacy. But she was being contained. And when she showed up pregnant, Gloria's voice shook. They didn't treat it like a pregnancy. They treated it like a crisis.
Mara's mind raced.
They didn't list a father.
Gloria let out a humorless laugh.
Of course they didn't. Mara's chest tightened. Did Celeste ever sign relinquishment papers? Gloria snapped her gaze back. No, she said, fierce. Not in front of me. Not with a clear mind. She was sedated. She was crying. She was begging to hold the baby longer. And then Gloria's voice broke. And then they injected her, and she went limp, and the baby was gone. Mara felt rage spread through her like fire. That's kidnapping. Gloria's face hardened. Say that in Cedar Ridge and see how long you keep your job, she said. Those people don't lose. They rewrite the scoreboard. Mara whispered, unless we force them not to. Gloria looked at her, and something shifted. You really are going to do this, Gloria said quietly. Mara didn't hesitate. Yes.
Gloria stared at Juniper, at the mark, at the small hands, at the innocent mouth.
Then Gloria exhaled, long and shaking, as if surrendering to something she'd avoided for years. Okay, she said.
Then I'll tell you what I remember.
But you don't put my name anywhere unless I say so. Mara nodded quickly. I swear. Gloria's voice turned steady in a way that felt practiced. The night Celeste delivered, she said, her father came to the hospital. Mara's stomach dropped. He was there. Gloria nodded. Not in the room. But he was there, she said. He stood behind the glass like it was an aquarium, and the baby was a fish he didn't want anyone else to see.
Mara's hands trembled.
Did he look at the baby?
Gloria's eyes narrowed.
He looked at the mark, she said. Like it confirmed something he feared. Mara swallowed hard. Why would he fear a birthmark? Gloria's mouth tightened. Because in that family, she whispered, marks mean stories. Old stories. The kind rich people keep in private. Mara's voice was low.
What kind of story?
Gloria hesitated, then said, they used to call it the whirl. A mark that showed up every so often in the women. Some of them believed it meant bad luck. Some believed it meant someone in the family line had ruined blood. Mara's chest burned. That's insane. Gloria's eyes were sharp. So is letting your money decide who gets to be human, she replied.
And yet, here we are.
Mara looked down at Juniper, feeling sick. So they wanted her gone because of superstition? Gloria shook her head. Not just that, she said. They wanted her gone because she was proof Celeste had been pregnant at all. Proof something happened to her that they couldn't spin. Mara's throat tightened. And now they want her back. Gloria's gaze turned grim. Now she's older, she said. Now she's visible. Now you've made her a person. That's harder to bury. Mara whispered, so they'll take her and hide her again. Gloria didn't answer. She didn't need to. When Mara left Gloria's house, her legs felt weak.
She drove home with Juniper asleep in the back seat, The sunlight too bright, the town too normal.
At a red light, Mara stared at her own reflection in the rearview mirror and felt the strangest thing happen. She stopped feeling like she was reacting. She started feeling like she was choosing. That night, Mara met Orson and Eamon at Orson's office after hours. The courthouse across the street was dark, the flag outside hanging limp in the still air. Mara put the printed articles and her notes on Orson's desk like she was laying out puzzle pieces. Orson read silently, face tightening. Eamon watched, jaw set, as if each line confirmed what he'd feared. Finally Orson looked up. "Gloria Vance," he said. "She's willing to testify?" "She's terrified," Mara replied. "But yes. If we protect her." Orson nodded slowly. "We'll take a sworn statement first," he said. "We keep it controlled. We don't let them ambush her." Eamon slid his handwritten statement forward. "And mine," he said. "It's not perfect, but it's what I remember." Orson read Eamon's page, then looked up with a grim expression. "You realize you're putting your license in a blender," he said. Eamon's voice was steady. "I realize a child is being used like evidence," he said. "And I'm done pretending that's normal." Orson tapped his pen, thinking. "Okay," he said. "We have a strategy." Mara leaned forward. "Tell me." Orson's tone turned clinical. "We respond to the petition with a demand for transparency," he said. "Who is the petitioner? What is their relationship? Why were they absent for so long? And we submit evidence of intimidation." Mara's heart pounded. "Will the judge care?" Orson's gaze was hard. "Judges care about looking fair," he said. "We give the judge a reason to demand answers without feeling like they're attacking a donor family." Mara's hands clenched. "So we make it about process." "Exactly," Orson said. "And meanwhile open another door." Eamon frowned. "What door?" Orson looked at Mara. "Adult Protective Services," he said. "Or whoever handles coerced patients. If Celeste Hartwell was held, sedated, forced, if there's any evidence, then this isn't just custody." Mara's breath caught. "It's criminal." Orson's voice lowered. "Potentially," he said. "And even the whisper of that changes how comfortable they feel pushing you around." Mara stared. Celeste could still be alive. Eamon's eyes sharpened. "Or she could be contained," he murmured. Mara felt her skin prickle. "How do we reach her?" Orson's mouth tightened. "We don't knock on the front gate," he said. "We look for cracks. Old nurses. Former staff. Anyone who left that women's health initiative. Paper trails in county filings. Property records. Corporate registrations." Mara swallowed. "This is bigger than me." Orson's gaze held hers. "Yes," he said. "Which is why you stop acting like you're begging for permission." Mara's voice shook. "I'm not begging." Orson nodded. "Good," he said. "Because the next part will get uglier." Eamon's jaw tightened. "They'll smear her." "They'll try," Orson said. "They'll paint Mara as unstable. They'll imply she stole a baby. They'll offer you a peaceful settlement. Then they'll punish you for refusing." Mara's throat tightened. "They already started." Orson looked at her folder again, at the threat photo, the hospital audit notice, the petition. "Then we're on schedule," he said grimly. Mara's voice went small but fierce. "I won, let them take her." Orson's expression didn't soften. It sharpened into respect. "Then you need to understand," he said, "this isn't just about keeping Juniper in your apartment. This is about forcing the truth into daylight so they can't carry her away like a file they pulled.
Mara pictured Juniper in the nursery bassinet under cold lights. The blank wristband. The absence of a name.
Mara whispered, "She deserves a life where nobody can erase her." Eamon nodded. "She deserves to grow up knowing she was wanted," he said.
Orson leaned forward.
"Then we build that reality," he said.
In ink.
2 days later, the smear campaign finally showed its teeth. It started online, like these things always did. A local site ran a headline that made Mara's stomach flip. "Hospital nurse accused of keeping baby without proper papers." The article was careful, slippery. It never outright called Mara a kidnapper. It simply asked questions. It referenced anonymous staff concerns. It hinted at mental health history. It included a grainy photo of Mara walking down the hallway with Juniper's carrier, shot from a distance, as if Mara was doing something secret. Mara stared at the screen until her vision blurred. Eamon called her immediately. His voice was tight. "Do not respond online," he said.
"Not yet." Mara's hands shook.
"They're making me look like a criminal." "I know," Eamon said. "That's the point. They want you emotional. They want you reckless."
Mara's voice cracked. "I am tired, Eamon."
His reply was quiet. "I know," he said. "But you're not alone."
Orson texted a single sentence. "Save everything. Screenshot.
Archive. Do nothing publicly until I tell you." Mara did as instructed. She saved, printed, organized, turning her kitchen table into a war room. Then, as if the universe wanted to prove how fast things could unravel, Denise from HR called again. "Mara," Denise said, voice too sweet, "we need you to come in for a wellness evaluation." Mara's chest went cold.
A wellness evaluation.
"It's routine," Denise insisted. "Given the stress you're under." Mara's voice turned hard. "I'm not doing that without my attorney."
Silence.
Then Denise's tone sharpened, just slightly. "Mara, if you refuse, it could be interpreted as non-compliance." Mara's hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. "Interpret it however you want," she said.
"All communication goes through Orson Creed."
She hung up. For a moment, she stood in her kitchen shaking with rage, Juniper babbling happily from her play mat. Mara looked down at Juniper's bright face, at the spiral mark that had drawn monsters out of shadows, and felt something iron settle into her spine. They could call her unstable. They could take her job. They could drag her name through every comment section in West Virginia. But they weren't going to do the one thing they wanted most. They weren't going to make her let go. That night, Mara opened her folder and added a new page at the front, handwritten in bold letters. "They are trying to erase her. I am not letting them." And for the first time since the lobby encounter, Mara stopped feeling like a nurse trapped in someone else's system. She started feeling like a mother building a wall brick by brick, document by document, against a family that believed money could rewrite reality.
Outside, Cedar Ridge slept under winter, dark hills.
Inside, Mara rocked Juniper to sleep, whispering into her hair like a promise carved into time. "They gave you up once," she murmured. "That was their choice." Juniper sighed, warm and safe. Mara's eyes burned. "And this," she whispered, "is mine." The smear campaign didn't hit Mara all at once. It arrived the way winter arrives in the mountains: first a sharp wind you dismiss, then a few flakes you pretend aren't serious, then one morning you open the door and realize the world has been buried while you were trying to sleep. After the first article, there was a second. And a third. Different sites, same wording, same anonymous concerns. the same careful phrasing that never outright accused Mara of kidnapping but nudged readers toward the conclusion like a hand on the back.
Questions raised. Community worried.
Hospital investigating. Even the comments looked coordinated new accounts, all posting variations of the same idea: she's unstable.
She wants attention.
That baby belongs with her real family. Mara learned quickly that public opinion wasn't a wave. It was a lever. Someone kept pulling it, trying to pry Juniper out of her arms without touching her directly. Orson Creed called it pressure by proxy. "They want you exhausted," he told Mara over the phone, his voice clipped with focus. "They want you spending all your energy arguing with strangers instead of building a legal record." Mara sat on her living room floor with Juniper crawling over her legs, chewing a teething ring like it was a full-time job. The apartment felt smaller lately, like the walls had inched inward. Mara kept the blinds half closed now, not because she wanted to hide, because she refused to give anyone a clean view. "I'm not arguing with strangers," Mara said. "I'm trying to keep my job."
Orson exhaled.
"Your job is leverage," he said. "If they can make you lose it, they can make you look unstable. If they can make you look unstable, they can push best interest arguments." Mara stared at the open folder on her coffee table: screenshots, notes, printouts, the legal petition clipped to the front like a threat you could hold in your hands.
"And if they win?"
Mara asked. Orson didn't soften it. "If they win, Juniper disappears into an arrangement that looks clean on paper," he said. "And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what clean was hiding." Juniper squealed, delighted by her own fingers, and Mara felt her chest tighten so hard it hurt. "They won't," Mara said. Orson's voice stayed steady. "Then we move," he replied. "Fast. Quiet. Smart." The next move was Gloria Vance. Gloria didn't want to be a hero. She didn't want to be on anyone's radar. She wanted her porch wind chimes and her peace and the right to die without lawyers at her doorstep. But Juniper's face had cracked something open in her, something old and guilty. Orson arranged for Gloria to come to his office after hours.
No courthouse traffic. No curious eyes.
He asked Mara to stay home with Juniper.
Mara hated that.
She hated being told to stay out of the room where people discussed her child's fate, but Orson was blunt. "If they're watching you, they'll watch where you go.
Let Gloria move without your shadow." So Mara waited.
She paced her apartment, cleaned already clean counters, rechecked locks she'd checked 5 times, and listened to Juniper's soft babble like it was the only stable thing in the universe. When Orson finally called, his voice was low. "She gave a sworn statement," he said. "Detailed. Dates, procedures, security presence. The sedation. The baby being removed."
Mara closed her eyes.
"She said it on record?" "Yes," Orson replied. "And she's terrified. But she did it."
Mara's voice cracked.
"That means Celeste Hartwell. It means Celeste was not freely consenting the way they want the court to believe," Orson said. "It means Juniper wasn't relinquished in the way the law likes to imagine. It means we can raise coercion and fraud issues without sounding like conspiracy."
Mara's hands trembled.
"Can they hurt Gloria?" Orson paused. "They can try to intimidate her," he said. "Which is why we're protecting her the only way we can be, making it harder for them to touch her without leaving fingerprints."
"How?"
"We're filing Gloria's statement under seal as part of our response," Orson said. "And we're notifying the court about intimidation evidence. Judges hate looking like they're being played." Mara swallowed. "And the hearing?" "It's scheduled," Orson said. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Mara stared at the calendar on her Wallen Old Free Hospital calendar with a photo of a river. 2 weeks sounded like nothing, but it also sounded like a lifetime when you were living inside fear. Juniper crawled into Mara's lap and patted her chest as if she'd sensed the shift. Mara held her tighter. The intimidation changed shape after Gloria's statement, like someone on the other side realized whispers weren't enough. It started with the hospital audit escalating. Compliance officers began roaming the floor, clipboards in hand, asking staff questions that felt less like quality control and more like fishing. Mara's manager Denise Harrow adopted a new expression whenever Mara walked by, a look that was half annoyance, half warning, like Mara had become a hazard sign. Then an email arrived in Mara's inbox labeled immediate action required. It was from HR. Mandatory psychological fitness evaluation. Failure to comply may impact employment status. Mara read it twice, feeling her heartbeat in her fingertips. She forwarded it to Orson immediately. Orson called her within minutes. "Do not go," he said. "They're saying I have to," Mara replied, voice tight. Orson's tone turned sharp. "They're not ordering you for your health. They're ordering you for paper," he said. "They want a document that says emotional instability. Even if it's vague. Even if it's framed as stress. They want language." Mara's stomach twisted. "But if I refuse?" "If you refuse, they'll threaten your job," Orson said. "And we'll handle that. But you do not walk into a room they control and answer questions they can twist." Mara stared at Juniper, who was sitting upright now, gnawing on a stuffed rabbit's ear with serious concentration. "So what do I do?" Mara asked. Orson's voice steadied. "We respond in writing," he said. "You're willing to cooperate with any legitimate workplace review, but only with counsel present, only with an independent evaluator, and only under clear scope. We make HR's demand look unreasonable." Mara exhaled slowly. "Okay." "And Mara," Orson added, "I need you to accept something." "What?" "This isn't about your performance," he said. "It's about your credibility. They're trying to make you look like you can't be trusted with reality." Mara's jaw clenched. "I know what reality is," she said. "Reality is Juniper is safe with me." "Then you hold on to that," Orson replied. "Because they're going to try to steal it from you." Eamon Pike's suspension came next. Mara found out the way she found out everything now through a sudden change in the air. She walked into the hospital one afternoon to pick up a form for Juniper's subsidy application. She'd taken Juniper to daycare for a half-day, one of the few places Mara felt relatively safe because the daycare director, a blunt woman named Tamsin Rourke, had told Mara up front, "If anybody asks questions about your kid that sound like legal strategy, I'll call you and then I'll call the police." Mara moved quickly through the hospital corridors, head down, trying not to meet eyes that might turn sharp. At the nurse's station, Kit Laramie caught her elbow. "Mara," Kit whispered, voice tight, "don't freak out." Mara's stomach dropped. "What happened?" Kit glanced around, then leaned in. "They pulled Pike into admin. Told him he's on temporary leave, pending investigation." Mara felt her blood go cold. "Investigation for what?" Kit's expression twisted. "They're saying he violated privacy," she hissed. "They're saying he overstepped. They're making it sound like he's emotionally involved." Mara's throat tightened. "He's a doctor. He's allowed to care." Kit's eyes narrowed. "Not when your caring interferes with somebody's plan," she muttered. Mara's hands shook. She turned and marched toward the administrative wing, then stopped herself. That was what they wanted. A scene. A headline. A hostile nurse. So instead she called Eamon. He answered, voice quiet. "Hey. Is it true?" Mara asked.
A pause.
Then, yes.
Mara closed her eyes. Eamon.
I'm fine, he said quickly. Listen to me. This is exactly what Orson said would happen. They're isolating you. Mara swallowed hard. I didn't want this to hurt you. Eamon's voice stayed firm. Mara, it didn't start with you, he said. It started the night they decided a baby was a liability. I'm just late to the fight. Mara's throat tightened. What are you going to do?
Eamon exhaled.
I'm going to give Orson everything I can, he said. I'm also going to request my personnel file and any complaint reports. If this becomes retaliatory, we document it.
Mara's voice cracked.
They're going after your license. They can try, Eamon replied. But they can't erase what I witnessed. Mara stared at the hospital hallway, the place that had been her livelihood and now felt like a machine chewing. Eamon, she whispered, I'm scared. His voice softened, but didn't waver. Good, he said. Fear means you're paying attention. Now use it. That night, Mara came home to something that almost broke her composure. It wasn't a break-in. Not the obvious kind. The door was locked. The windows were intact.
Nothing valuable was missing.
But Juniper's tiny wrist bracelet, the one Mara had kept in a plastic bag from the earliest days, the one she'd used like a relic when she needed to remember why she fought, wasn't in the drawer where Mara stored it. Mara stood frozen in her bedroom, drawer open, clothes folded neatly, the bag missing like it had never existed. Her heart hammered. Her hands went numb. Juniper sat on the carpet behind her, stacking plastic cups with innocent determination. Mara forced herself to breathe. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She did what nursing had trained her to do when something went wrong: assess, document, escalate. She searched the apartment methodically, every drawer, every shelf, every pocket, every bag. It wasn't there. Then she noticed something else. On Juniper's play mat, centered like a deliberate message, was a small object Mara didn't recognize.
A silver cufflink.
Simple. Expensive. Engraved with a tiny, stylized H. Mara stared at it until her vision narrowed. A cufflink didn't wander into an apartment by accident. This wasn't theft. This was a reminder. We can enter your life whenever we want.
Mara's skin prickled.
She picked up the cufflink using a tissue, dropped it into a zip bag, and labeled it like evidence. Then she called Orson. He answered immediately, voice alert. What happened? They were in my apartment, Mara said, trying to keep her voice steady.
Nothing broken.
Nothing stolen except Juniper's bracelet. And they left something. Orson's tone hardened. Do not touch anything else, he said. Take photos. Every room. Locks.
Windows.
The object. Then call the police and file a report, yes, even if they shrug. Mara's throat tightened. The police in Cedar Ridge. I know, Orson cut in. But we need a report number. We need a paper trail that shows escalating intimidation. Mara swallowed. Okay. And Mara, Orson added, this is important. Do not start sleeping with a baseball bat and telling yourself you can handle this alone.
Mara laughed once, hollow.
What else am I supposed to do? Orson's voice sharpened. You build a circle, he said. We get you somewhere safer if we can. We lock down daycare pickups. We increase visibility. Visibility makes them angrier, Mara whispered. Visibility makes them careful, Orson replied.
Predators hatte Leid.
The police officer who came to Mara's apartment was polite and useless in the way polite uselessness can be. He was young, freshly shaved, his uniform crisp. He walked through the apartment, nodded at Mara's photos, took the cufflink bag with eyebrows raised, and asked questions that sounded like he was trying to keep the conversation small. "No forced entry?" he asked.
"No." "Anything else missing besides the bracelet?" "No."
"You sure you didn't misplace it?" Mara's jaw clenched. "I'm sure." He scribbled on his notepad, then looked up with a careful expression. "Ma'am, without signs of forced entry, it's hard to classify." Mara's voice went quiet and sharp. "Then classify it as intimidation," she said. The officer hesitated. "I can note suspicious circumstances." Mara stared at him. "Do that," she said. "And give me the report number." He did. Mara wrote the number on the front of her folder in thick ink. Because even if Cedar Ridge shrugged, a court could not ignore a chain of reports. Not forever.
The next morning, Mara got a call from an unknown number again.
This time, someone spoke. A woman's voice, calm and distant. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Mara's grip tightened on her phone. "Who is this?" A pause. Then the same voice, "You are not her mother." Mara's chest burned. "I'm the one who stayed." The voice didn't change. "A judge will decide that." Mara's stomach turned. "You broke into my apartment."
A soft chuckleno humor in it.
"You have no proof."
Mara's voice was steady.
"I have a police report number." Silence. Then the voice said, colder, "Stop while you can still walk away." Mara's jaw clenched.
"I am not walking away."
A long pause. Then, "People like you always think love will protect you." The call ended. Mara stared at the phone screen, shaking. Juniper toddled into the room with a toy in her hands and bumped Mara's knee like a little question. Mara lifted her, pressed her cheek to Juniper's hair, and whispered, "Love is why we're fighting." But inside, Mara understood what the voice had meant. They weren't scared of Mara's love. They were scared of what Mara's love would expose. Orson pushed forward anyway. He filed motions. He demanded to know the identity of the concerned relative. He requested audit logs from hospital records. He sent formal letters to HR and administration warning of retaliation and requesting preservation of all internal communications related to Mara and Dr. Pika. He also did something Mara didn't expect. He found a journalist. Not a big network. Not someone who'd be dazzled by a Hartwell donation. An independent reporter named Rowan Delacroix, who ran a small investigative channel and a newsletter that people in West Virginia passed around when they were tired of being fed polished stories. Rowan agreed to meet Mara off hospital property, in a diner just outside town where the coffee tasted like burned courage and the booths squeaked when you shifted. Orson sat with them, not as a shield but as a boundary. Jessa came too, representing the foster care office, because Orson wanted it clear, this wasn't just a nurse's story. This was an official placement under review. Rowan arrived in a worn jacket, hair slightly messy, eyes sharp. Not unkind. Just unwilling to be charmed. Rowan didn't start with, "Tell me your side." Rowan started with, "Why are you the target?" Mara blinked. "What do you mean?" Rowan leaned forward. "Smear campaigns don't happen for random foster placements," Rowan said. "You're not the first nurse in America to take in a baby. So why you? Why this baby?" Mara's throat tightened. "Because of her birthmark," she said. "Because someone thinks it's a curse." Rowan's eyes narrowed.
"Do you believe that?" Mara shook her head.
"No," she said. "But I believe either they use it as an excuse." Rowan's gaze flicked to Juniper, who sat in Mara's lap, playing with a napkin. The mark on her cheek was visible. Rowan didn't flinch. Rowan didn't stare like it was a defect. Rowan looked at Juniper like she was a child. Then Rowan looked back at Mara. "What do you want?" Rowan asked, "from the public?"
Mara hesitated.
Because what she wanted was simple and enormous. "I want people to stop treating her like a file," Mara said quietly. "I want them to see she's real." Rowan nodded slowly. "And are you willing to go on record?" Orson cut in. "We can do an interview," he said. "Controlled. No doxing.
No daycare location. No home address.
And no speculation that can't be supported." Rowan held Orson's gaze. "I don't publish rumors," Rowan said. "I publish patterns."
Mara's hands trembled.
"If I speak," she said, "they'll come harder." Rowan's expression didn't soften into pity. It sharpened into something like respect. "They're already coming," Rowan said. "Speaking doesn't invite the storm. It changes who sees it." Mara stared at Juniper, then looked up.
"Okay, Mara Said." Rowan's eyes held hers.
"Then you say one thing that can't be edited," Rowan said. "One sentence that people can't forget." Mara swallowed.
The diner noise blurred around her plates, voices, the clink of silverware.
She thought of the nursery bassinet.
The blank tag. The cufflink on the play mat. The missing bracelet. Eamon's suspension. Gloria's shaking hands.
Mara whispered, "If you want a sentence," she said, "here it is." Rowan waited. Mara lifted her head and spoke with a steadiness she didn't feel but chose anyway. "If I'm wrong for loving an abandoned child," Mara said, "then who was right to abandon her?" The booth went quiet. Even the waitress slowed for a second, like the words had weight. Rowan didn't smile. Rowan simply nodded, like a journalist recognizing a truth that didn't need polish.
"That's the line," Rowan said softly. "That's the one." The interview aired 3 days later.
It was only 10 minutes long. No dramatic music, no theatrical edits. Just Mara, plain-faced, holding Juniper, speaking like someone who had decided not to be ashamed of tenderness. Rowan didn't call the Hartwells by name. Rowan didn't accuse a specific person of a specific crime. Rowan did something more dangerous. Rowan laid out the timeline. A baby relinquished with no name. A nurse takes emergency placement. A mysterious representative offers money. A threat photo appears. A hospital audit arrives unusually fast. A doctor is suspended after supporting the nurse. An HR fitness evaluation demand appears after legal filings. A police report is filed after suspicious entry. Rowan called it what it looked like. A coordinated effort to control the narrative. Mara watched it alone that night after putting Juniper to bed, her laptop balanced on the kitchen table like a fragile bomb. When she heard her own voice say that sentence again, "If I'm wrong," her throat tightened. She expected backlash. It came. But something else came too. Support.
Not the loud kind at first. The quiet kind.
A message from a mom across the county. "I fostered 2 babies. I know what they're doing to you.
You're not alone."
A donation envelope in Mara's mailbox, no name, just a gift card for diapers. A voicemail from a retired social worker, "Call me. I might know something about private placements years ago." A co-worker who'd avoided her for weeks stopped her in the hall and whispered, "I'm sorry. I believed the rumors." Then the interview spread beyond Cedar Ridge. It hit regional pages. It got shared by people who didn't care who funded the hospital's lobby plaque. And the Hartwell-friendly local sites tried to counter it with another article more aggressive, more desperate. But the tone had changed. Because now, people were asking, Why would anyone go this hard against a nurse? The question itself was a crack. And cracks, Mara learned, were how light got in. Orson called Mara the next morning, voice sharp with momentum. "It's working," he said. Mara's heart pounded.
"What's working?"
"Public visibility," Orson replied.
"They can pretend you alone unstable woman anymore. Too many eyes."
Mara swallowed. "That makes them careful." "It makes them strategic," Orson corrected. "Which means they'll try something cleaner." Mara's stomach tightened. "Like what?" Orson paused. "They'll present a perfect alternative caregiver," he said. "Someone polished. Someone stable. Someone with a last name that looks safe to the court." Mara's throat burned. "A fake aunt." "Or a real one," Orson said. "But either way, the point is optics. They want the judge to look at you and look at them and think, this is easier." Mara's hands clenched. "Juniper isn't an easy decision." Orson's voice stayed firm. "No," he said. "She's a human decision. Which courts sometimes forget until you remind them." Mara stared at Juniper's sleeping form on the baby monitor screen, tiny chest rising, cheek mark visible even in the dim light. "How do we remind them?"
Mara whisperet.
Orson's answer was immediate. "We bring the truth," he said. "And we bring it in a way the judge can't ignore." "Glorious statement," Mara said. "Yes," Orson replied. "And amens."
"And your documentation. And the intimidation chain."
And he paused. "We're going to attempt something else." Mara's pulse spiked. "What?" "We're going to try to find Celeste Hartwell," Orson said.
Mara's breath caught.
"Can we?" Orson's voice lowered. "I don't know," he admitted. "But someone out there knows where she's been. And the more noise we make, the more likely a crack opens." Mara swallowed hard. "If she appears." "If she appears," Orson said, "everything changes." That night, after Juniper was asleep, Mara opened the drawer where she kept her evidence folder and found something new.
A plain white envelope.
No stamp.
No return address.
It hadn't been there earlier.
Mara's skin prickled.
She didn't open it right away. She photographed it from every angle. She checked the locks again. She made sure Juniper's crib was secure. She called Orson and left a message. "I found an envelope.
Documenting."
Then she sat at the table and forced her hands to stop shaking long enough to slide a letter opener beneath the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. No signature.
Only one line.
She never signed. Mara stared until her eyes burned. Below the line was a photocopy, faded, crooked, like it had been made quickly.
A hospital consent form. A signature line left blank.
And a date that matched the night Juniper was born.
Mara's breath caught.
Someone had access to documents Mara couldn't access. Someone was watching the case. Someone inside the system or near Ithad decided to help. Juniper shifted in her sleep on the baby monitor, turning her cheek toward the camera. The mark looked like a tiny storm that had survived every attempt to erase it. Mara pressed her fingertips to the paper, not as a superstition, but as a promise. This wasn't just a fight for custody anymore. This was a fight against an entire machine designed to make certain people disappear quietly, legally, cleanly. And now, someone from within that machine had slipped Mara a key. Mara folded the document carefully, filed it, and wrote a new note at the front of her folder. Anonymous evidence received, she never signed. Preserve. Verify. Use. Then she looked at the calendar again. 2 weeks. And for the first time, Mara didn't only feel dread. She felt something else, small but real. Hope. Because if a hidden hand had reached out to confirm the truth, it meant the truth was still alive. And if the truth was alive, then maybe Celeste Hartwell was too. Court day didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It arrived like a slow choke. Mara woke before her alarm, the way she had for weeks, heart already running as if it had heard bad news in its sleep. The apartment was dark and still. Juniper's baby monitor showed a tiny lump under a blanket, one arm flung out like she owned the world. The spiral mark on her cheek was faint in the low light, but Mara could still see it because once you loved something, you saw it even in shadow. Mara sat on the edge of her bed and forced her breathing to slow. Today wasn't just a hearing. It was a fork in the road where people in suits would decide whether Juniper remained a child with a life, or became a situation again, cleaned up, hidden, sealed, and placed somewhere with polished floors and locked doors.
Mara dressed quietly.
No scrubs today. She wore the plainest outfit she owned that still looked like she respected the room. Dark slacks, a simple blouse, a cardigan.
Nothing dramatic.
Nothing that could be used to label her unstable or attention-seeking. Orson had explained it bluntly, don't give them costumes to hang their story on. Juniper woke as Mara packed the diaper bag, snacks, water, wipes, a small quiet toy, a soft blanket that smelled like home. Juniper blinked, sat up, and grinned at Mara like today was a party. Mama, Juniper said, not perfectly formed but unmistakable. Mara's throat tightened. Yeah, she whispered. I'm here. She kissed Juniper's forehead and held her longer than necessary, not because it was necessary, but because she needed to store the warmth somewhere inside her for the cold room waiting downtown. Orson had told Mara not to bring Juniper unless the judge requested it.
The court could interpret it as emotional manipulation.
The other side could claim Mara was using the child.
The logic made sense.
The cruelty of it did not. So Juniper would stay with Tamsin Rourke at the daycare. Tamsin, the only person in Cedar Ridge who had spoken to Mara like a soldier instead of a rumor. Mara strapped Juniper into the car seat and drove through town under a winter sky that looked scrubbed clean. Cedar Ridge moved like it always did, gas station lights flickering, a few trucks rolling by, the diner sign glowing half-broken. The normality felt insulting. At the daycare, Tamsin met Mara at the door with a clipboard in one hand and a tight expression.
How is your head?
Tamsin asked. Mara blinked. My head. Tamsin pointed at Mara's face like she meant it literally. You're pale, she said. And you look like you're about to walk into a cage match. Mara tried to smile. It came out weak.
It feels like that.
Tamsin crouched to Juniper's level. Hey Junebug, she said, voice warm.
You ready to boss everybody around today?
Juniper giggled, delighted. Tamsin stood again, gaze hard. I locked down pickup, she said quietly. Password required.
No exceptions.
If anybody shows up looking like legal trouble, I call you and then I call the police.
Mara exhaled shakily.
Thank you. Tamsin waved her off like gratitude was unnecessary. Go win, she said. And Mara? Mara paused.
Tamsin's eyes held hers.
Don't let them make you feel ashamed for being the safe place, she said. Mara nodded once, and walked back to her car without looking like she might cry. Because she could cry later. First, she had to survive the room. Orson Creed met Mara outside the courthouse steps, holding a worn briefcase and a thicker binder than Mara thought should legally exist. The courthouse in Wexler County was old stone columns, carved eagles, a staircase that made everyone climb like they were approaching judgment in more ways than one. A few local reporters stood near the entrance, pretending to check their phones while clearly waiting for faces. Rowan Delacroix was there too, not filming, just watching, eyes sharp, hands tucked into a jacket pocket like someone who had learned how to stand near danger without becoming part of it. Orson stepped close to Mara and kept his voice low. "You don't talk to anyone," he said. "Not reporters.
Not curious strangers. Not the other side. If somebody tries, you look at me."
Mara's stomach churned. "Okay." Orson studied her face. "You slept."
Mara let out a short laugh.
"Sure." Orson nodded like he expected that answer. "We'll get through it," he said. Then, softer, "You've already done the hardest part. You stayed."
Mara's eyes stung.
"That doesn't count in court." Orson's gaze sharpened. "It does if we make it count," he replied. They walked inside together. The hallway smelled like old wood and overheated air.
Fluorescent lights buzzed.
People whispered. The court clerk called names with bored precision, like she was announcing dental appointments instead of custody battles. At the end of the hall, Mara saw them.
The Hartwell team.
They arrived like a coordinated performance, a well-dressed attorney with perfect hair and a leather portfolio, 2 assistants carrying sleek folders, and a woman who looked like she belonged on a billboard. Tall, polished, calm, the kind of calm you buy with expensive skincare and a life where consequences happen to other people. She wore a pale coat and pearl earrings. Her hair was pulled into a neat twist. Her makeup was flawless and deliberately understated. She was beautiful in the way a glass sculpture is beautiful, cold, fragile if struck, and dangerous if broken. Orson leaned in. "That's their placement option," he murmured. "Not the mother.
Not the father.
Someone they can present as safe." Mara's jaw clenched. She wasn't there when Juniper was born. Orson nodded. "Exactly," he said. "But courts like clean stories. We're going to dirty theirs with facts." The Hartwell attorney glanced at Mara and smiled politely, like he was greeting a colleague at a fundraiser. "Mara Sloan," he said, voice smooth.
E.M. Miles Camden.
Representing the Hartwell family's petition. Mara didn't respond. She looked at Orson. Orson's tone was flat. "No direct contact," he said. Miles' smile didn't slip. "Of course," he replied, as if rules were something he enjoyed. Then he turned slightly and spoke softly to his client, the polished woman who nodded once without looking at Mara, like Mara was a person. She looked at Mara like Mara was a problem standing too close to property. Mara's hands trembled, but she kept them in her pockets.
Orson touched her elbow gently.
"Eyes forward," he murmured. "We don't fight in the hallway." Mara swallowed. "I don't want to fight," she said. Orson's gaze stayed steady. "I know," he replied. "That's why you will." The courtroom was smaller than Mara expected.
Not a grand chamber.
Just a functional room with a judge's bench, a few rows of hard seats, and the kind of quiet that didn't feel respectful, it felt predatory. The judge, Hon. Evelyn Marwick, entered with an expression that suggested she had seen too many people try to win and not enough people try to be right. She was in her late 50s, hair gray and pulled back, eyes sharp and tired. She didn't smile at anyone. "Be seated," the bailiff said. Mara sat beside Orson, hands folded tightly. She could feel her heartbeat in her wrists. Miles Camden stood first, confident, voice resonant. "Your Honor," he began, "we're here for an emergency custody review concerning a minor child currently placed under an informal and legally fragile arrangement. The petitioner seeks to ensure the child's stability, safety, and lawful care." He spoke as if he were selling an insurance plan. Mara listened to the words and felt anger rise like heat. Stability. Safety. Lawful care. Where had stability been when Juniper lay alone in a nursery with no name? Miles continued, unfurling his narrative with practiced ease. He emphasized that Mara was not biologically related, that the placement was temporary, that Mara's work schedule was intense, that she had recent stressors, including public controversy and workplace concerns. Then he slid the knife in gently. There have been reports, Miles said, of emotional instability, potential boundary issues, and a pattern of resistance to reasonable administrative review. This court must consider whether Ms. Sloan can provide the long-term environment this child deserves. Mara's stomach clenched. Orson's hand lifted slightly, a signal, stay calm. Miles nodded toward the polished woman. The petitioner offers a relative with a safe home, resources, and a stable family structure, he said.
Ms.
Arden Hartwell, an adult half-sibling of the child's biological mother, has come forward to assume guardianship.
Arden Hartwell rose smoothly, face serene.
She didn't look at Mara. She looked at the judge like she was already being trusted.
Ms.
Hartwell, Judge Marwick said, you understand what guardianship entails. Yes, Your Honor, Arden replied. Her voice was soft, controlled.
I want what is best for the child.
And you have no prior relationship with the child? The judge asked. Arden's smile stayed in place. I wasn't aware the child existed until recently, she said. As soon as I learned, I took action. Mara's nails dug into her palm.
As soon as I learned.
Like Juniper was a surprise purchase. Miles sat down as if the case was already finished. Judge Marwick turned to Orson.
Mr. Creed.
Orson stood calm, his voice less polished than Miles but heavier, like it belonged to someone who meant what he said. Your Honor, Orson began, this is not a normal petition. This is a coordinated attempt to remove a child from the only stable caregiver she has ever known through intimidation, reputation harm, and manipulation of records. Miles rose immediately.
Objection argumentative and speculative.
Judge Marwick raised a hand. I'll allow it for context, she said, gaze firm. Proceed, Mr.
Creed.
Orson nodded. Thank you. He started with the basics: quiet, undeniable facts. Juniper was relinquished at birth. No legal guardian stepped forward for months. Mara accepted emergency placement. Juniper received consistent medical care.
A stable routine.
Verified daycare. Documented safety checks. Home visits.
Training compliance.
Then Orson shifted. Within days of my client seeking legal clarity, Orson said, Ms. Sloan received an in-person offer of money to relinquish the child delivered in a public hospital lobby by a representative who refused to identify herself. Miles' expression remained neutral. His eyes did not. Orson continued, voice steady. Following Ms. Sloan's refusal, she received a threat message containing a surveillance photograph of the child taken without consent. She filed reports. She documented everything. Shortly after, the hospital launched actions that appear retaliatory, attempting to force a psychological fitness evaluation outside standard practice.
Dr.
Eamon Pike, a physician who supported Ms. Sloan, was suspended under vague allegations.
Miles rose again.
Objection: irrelevant employment matters. Orson didn't flinch. It's relevant to intimidation and credibility attacks, he said. Judge Marwick's gaze narrowed. Overruled, she said.
Continue.
Orson placed a stack of exhibits on the clerk's desk, printed emails, screenshots, the police report number, and carefully an evidence bag containing the silver cufflink with the engraved H. Mara watched the judge's eyes land on the cufflink. It was the first time she saw Judge Marwick's expression shift from routine fatigue to interest. What is that? The judge asked. Orson's tone stayed measured.
MS.
Sloane found evidence of unauthorized entry into her home, he said. No forced entry. One specific item missing, the child's hospital bracelet MS. Sloane kept as a record. And that cufflink left behind on the child's play mat. Miles' jaw tightened.
This is sensational.
Orson's voice stayed calm. No, he said. It's a warning left for a caregiver who refused to sell a child. The room went quieter. Judge Marwick leaned forward.
MS.
Sloane, she said, looking directly at Mara for the first time, do you have reason to believe you and the child are being monitored? Mara's mouth went dry. Orson nodded once. Speak carefully. Yes, Your Honor, Mara said. Her voice was soft but steady. I have received surveillance photos. I have received anonymous calls. I filed reports. I documented everything. Judge Marwick's gaze sharpened. Do you have any history of mental health diagnosis that would impair your care? Miles' eyes flicked to Mara like he'd been waiting for the question. Mara felt her chest tighten, then forced herself to breathe. No, Your Honor, she said. I'm tired. I'm stressed. But I'm stable. I go to work. I show up. I feed her. I take her to appointments. I do what a mother does.
Miles rose. Objection non responsive.
Judge Marwick held up a hand, eyes still on Mara. I heard her, she said. Then she looked at Orson. You mentioned records manipulation. Orson nodded. Yes, Your Honor, he said. Hospital newborn records associated with the child appear to have been altered or removed from internal archives. My client attempted to retrieve copies and was told scanned attachments were missing and physical files pulled without log. Miles smiled faintly. Hospitals misfile records all the time. Orson didn't blink. Not like this, he said. Then Orson made the move Mara didn't expect. The introduced Gloria Vance. Gloria entered from the side door, escorted quietly, shoulders stiff. She looked older than Mara remembered. Not physically, spiritually. Like showing up had cost her something. Miles' expression changed, just slightly, the way a poker player's face changes when an unexpected card hits the table. Gloria took the stand. Orson asked simple questions. Gloria answered, voice thin but clear. She described the private delivery, the side corridor,
the security presence,
the sedation, the newborn removed quickly, the absence of a freely signed relinquishment. Miles cross-examined with smooth cruelty.
MS.
Vance, he said, you're telling this court you remember precise details from a delivery 25 years ago.
Gloria's hands trembled slightly.
I remember it because it was wrong, she said. Miles leaned in. Or because someone has encouraged you to invent it.
Gloria's eyes flashed.
Nobody encouraged me, she snapped. I stayed quiet for decades because I was scared. I'm speaking now because I'm tired of being scared. Miles' smile thinned. You have documentation? Gloria swallowed. I have my memory, she said. And I have a photo I kept because I couldn't stomach what happened. Orson offered it as an exhibit, a faded photograph showing Celeste in bed, sedated, and a newborn with the same spiral mark. The judge studied it. Miles objected, argued chain of custody, suggested manipulation. Judge Marwick didn't rule instantly. She stared at the photo, then at Juniper's picture in Orson's binder, then back at Gloria. You understand, Judge Marwick said carefully, that if your statements are false, there are consequences. Gloria's voice shook, but she didn't back down. I understand, she said. And I'm telling you the truth. The judge's eyes softened by a fraction, then hardened again into focus.
Orson sat down.
The room held its breath. Then the unexpected happened. The back door of the courtroom opened. Not loudly.
No dramatic slam.
Just a quiet creak that somehow cut through everything.
A woman stepped in.
At first, Mara didn't recognize her. She wore a plain coat, not tailored. Her hair was pulled back without elegance. No pearls. No sunglasses.
No entourage.
Her face was pale. Her eyes looked older than her years, as if time had been heavy on them. But there was something about her, something in the bone structure, the set of the mouth that matched the faded photo Gloria had shown. Mara's heart stuttered. The woman didn't scan the room like Arden had. She didn't arrive with performance. She arrived like someone walking into her own past. The bailiff moved to stop her, but Judge Marwick raised a hand. "Identify yourself," Judge Marwick said, voice firm. The woman swallowed. Her hands shook as she lifted a folder to her chest like armor.
"My name is Celeste Hartwell," she said.
The courtroom went absolutely still. Mara heard her own breath.
Miles Camden's pen froze mid-air.
Arden Hartwell's composed expression cracked for half a second, just a flicker of panic before it smoothed again. Celeste's gaze moved across the room, landing on Juniper's photos in the exhibits, then on Mara. Celeste's eyes filled not with drama, but with something quiet and brutal, recognition. "I'm the child's mother," Celeste said, voice unsteady. "And I'm here because I saw the interview. I saw her face. I saw the mark. And I realized after 25 years that my daughter didn't disappear. She was stolen from my life." A murmur rippled through the room like wind through dry leaves. Miles stood quickly. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We have no notice, no verified identity, no." Judge Marwick cut him off. "Sit down, Mr. Camden," she said sharply. "If this is Celeste Hartwell, I will hear her." Celeste stepped forward, trembling.
Orson rose slowly, eyes fixed on her. "Ms.
Hartwell," he said gently, "do you have identification?" Celeste nodded and handed her folder to the clerk. It contained ID, medical records, and most importantly an independent DNA test result. Judge Marwick reviewed it silently. Then she looked up, gaze razor-sharp.
"Ms.
Hartwell," she said, "are you asserting you did not voluntarily relinquish your child?"
Celeste's voice broke.
"I didn't," she said. "I never signed. I never consented. I was medicated. I was told I was unstable. I was told I would destroy my family if I fought. I was kept away." Mara's chest tightened. The anonymous envelope echoed. She never signed. Celeste continued, voice shaking but gaining strength as truth found its footing.
"My father Gideon Hartwell controlled everything," she said.
"He controlled where I lived, who I spoke to, what doctors I saw. When I became pregnant, it wasn't treated like a pregnancy. It was treated like a scandal to be contained." Miles' face tightened.
"Objection defamatory and irrelevant."
Judge Marwick didn't even look at him. "Overruled," she said. "This goes directly to consent and coercion."
Celeste's hands trembled.
"After the birth, I was sedated," she said. "I remember begging to hold her longer. I remember someone saying, 'We'll handle it.' And then I woke up and they told me my baby had been placed elsewhere. They told me she was gone. They said the mark meant she shouldn't be connected to the family. They said it was a curse." Arden's jaw clenched. Celeste's gaze flicked to Arden, then away. "I spent years believing I was crazy," she said. "Because that's what they needed me to believe. That my memory wasn't real. That my grief was weakness." Mara felt tears sting her eyes and hated herself for it because she couldn't afford to fall apart here. Judge Marwick leaned forward.
Ms.
Hartwell, she asked, are you seeking immediate custody of the child today? Celeste's eyes moved again to Mara, and this time there was something in them that looked like gratitude and pain braided together.
No, Celeste said softly.
I'm not.
A murmur rose: confusion, surprise.
Celeste swallowed hard. I don't get to show up after 25 years and pretend I can replace the woman who raised her, she said, voice shaking. I'm her mother by blood. But I wasn't her mother in life. I want to know her. I want to have a chance to be present. But I'm not here to take her away from the only person who protected her.
Mara's breath caught.
Celeste looked at the judge. I'm here to tell you that Ms. Sloane is not a kidnapper, Celeste said. She is not unstable. She is the reason my daughter is alive in the world instead of buried in a lie. Judge Marwick's expression shifted into something Mara couldn't read: part skepticism, part gravity. And you have verified DNA? Judge Marwick asked. Celeste nodded. Yes, she said. I'll do any additional test the court orders. I'll cooperate fully. Judge Marwick stared at Miles Camden.
Mr.
Camden, she said coldly, you filed this petition under the banner of best interest. Yet the biological mother is now present, asserting coercion, and presenting DNA evidence. Explain to me why the biological mother was not the petitioner. Miles' mouth opened, then closed. His perfect composure finally wobbled. Your Honor, he said carefully, the family representative acted on information available at the time.
Ms.
Hartwell has been unwell. Celeste flinched, anger flashing. Unwell, she repeated. That word has been used to cage me for decades. Judge Marwick's gaze sharpened further.
Ms.
Hartwell, she asked, are you under guardianship? Celeste swallowed. I was, she said. I fought to end it.
I have documentation.
It was terminated. I am legally competent. Judge Marwick held Celeste's eyes for a long moment. Then she looked at Mara.
Ms.
Sloane, Judge Marwick said, you understand the gravity of this. Your placement was lawful, but it is not adoption. This court must act with caution. Mara forced herself to speak without shaking. Yes, Your Honor, she said. Judge Marwick's gaze softened a fraction. And why are you fighting? She asked. The question landed heavy, because it wasn't legal. It was human. Mara swallowed hard. She felt Orson's steady presence beside her, like a hand on her back even without touch. Mara stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform. She spoke the way she spoke to frightened patients at 3 a.m. plain, direct, sincere. Because she didn't have anyone, Mara said. Because she was left with no name and no arms around her. And she didn't ask for any of this. She just needed someone to keep choosing her. Judge Marwick's eyes stayed on Mara. Mara continued, voice cracking slightly. If I did something wrong by taking her in, then tell me what the right thing was, she said. Because the right thing couldn't have been leaving her alone. Silence. Then Judge Marwick said quietly, that's enough.
Sit. Mara sat, trembling.
Judge Marwick leaned back, hands folded, eyes moving across the room like she was mapping everyone's motives. Then she spoke. This court is not prepared to transfer custody today, she said. Not to anyone.
Miles' shoulders stiffened.
Arden's face tightened. Mara's heart hammered. Judge Marwick continued, voice firm. Given credible allegations of intimidation, missing records, and potential coercion surrounding the child's original relinquishment, I am ordering the following. She looked at the clerk. 1 ms. Sloan will retain temporary placement and caregiving rights pending further proceedings. Mara's breath left her in a rush she couldn't control. Judge Marwick wasn't done. 2. A protective order is issued prohibiting any unauthorized contact, surveillance, or intimidation directed toward Ms.
Sloan or the child.
Any violations will be referred for immediate investigation. Miles' jaw clenched hard enough to show. 3. I am ordering a full review of hospital record logs, including access audits, regarding the child's birth documentation. If records have been altered or removed, I will refer findings to appropriate authorities. The judge's eyes flicked to the hospital representatives seated near the back faces tight. 4. I am ordering expedited DNA verification in this case with a court-approved lab.
Ms.
Hartwell has provided results. We will confirm. Celeste nodded, tears spilling now silent. 5. Judge Marwick said, gaze sharpening, I am ordering this matter continued and expanded into a broader inquiry regarding the circumstances of the child's relinquishment and the biological mother's claims. She looked at Miles Camden like he was something she was no longer impressed by.
Mr.
Camden, Judge Marwick said, your petition framed this as a stability concern. It is now evident it may be a fraud concern. Adjust your expectations accordingly. Miles swallowed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Judge Marwick turned to Celeste.
Ms.
Hartwell, she said, you have asserted serious claims. If these are substantiated, there will be consequences beyond family court. Celeste nodded, voice small. I understand. Judge Marwick's gaze moved to Mara again.
Ms.
Sloan, she said, I am not ruling on permanent custody today. But I am recognizing one fact clearly, the child's immediate stability has been with you. Mara's eyes burned. Thank you, she whispered. Judge Marwick's voice softened just slightly, the way a steel door softens when it closes gently instead of slamming. This court will not reward intimidation, she said. And it will not treat a child like a secret. Then she struck her gavel. Adjourned. When the hearing ended, the courtroom burst into movement like a dam breaking, whispers, footsteps, papers shuffling, lawyers clustering.
Orson grabbed Mara's elbow gently.
Don't stop, he said. We leave now. Calm.
No interviews. Rowan Delacroix stood near the doorway, eyes sharp, recording nothing but watching everything.
Miles Camden moved quickly toward Judge Marwick, trying to speak, but the bailiff blocked him. Arden Hartwell turned to Celeste with a tight smile that looked like it hurt.
This is unfortunate, Arden murmured. Celeste's eyes flashed.
It was unfortunate when my baby was taken, she said quietly. This is just truth arriving late.
Arden's smile vanished. She walked away without another word.
Celeste hesitated, then looked toward Mara. Mara froze. She didn't know what to do with Celeste Hartwell standing in front of her like a living ghost.
Celeste's hands trembled. Mara, she whispered.
Mara's voice came out hoarse. She's safe, Mara said. Celeste nodded quickly, tears spilling. I know, she whispered. Because of you. Mara swallowed. Why now? She asked, not accusatory, just raw. Why did you wait so long?
Celeste's face crumpled.
I didn't wait, she said.
I was trapped.
I was told she was gone. I was told I imagined it. Her breath hitched. I was kept quiet until I believed quiet was my nature. Mara's throat tightened. She glanced down, as if searching for Juniper in her arms out of habit, then remembered she wasn't there. Celeste noticed the glance. Is she? At daycare, Mara said quickly, protective instinct flaring. Celeste nodded, understanding. Good, she whispered. Keep her away from all of this. Orson stepped closer, gently but firmly.
MS.
Hartwell, he said, we will coordinate future contact through counsel. Today is not the day for informal arrangements. Celeste nodded, wiping her eyes. Of course, she whispered. I don't want to hurt her. I don't want to confuse her. I just want the chance to be real. Mara stared at Celeste, feeling anger and compassion collide inside her like weather systems. Finally Mara said quietly, if you're telling the truth then help us make sure nobody ever gets to treat her like a secret again. Celeste nodded hard. I will, she said. I swear.
Orson guided Mara down the hallway and out of the courthouse before Mara's knees gave out. Outside, the cold air hit Mara's face like a slap.
Mara stood on the courthouse steps and tried to breathe. Orson's voice was low beside her. You did good, he said. Mara's throat tightened. She showed up, Mara whispered. Celeste showed up. Orson nodded. That changes the entire landscape, he said.
Mara's hands shook.
They can't erase her now. Orson's expression turned grim. They'll try, he said. But now it costs them more. Rowan approached, not with a microphone, just with that journalist's intensity that felt like sunlight. I won't quote you, Rowan said quietly. But I need to know, was that really Celeste? Orson answered, not Mara. DNA documentation submitted, he said. Court-ordered verification pending. Rowan nodded, eyes narrowing. Then this isn't just custody, Rowan murmured. Orson's jaw tightened. Correct, he said. Rowan looked at Mara. You just forced a crack in a wall that's been up for decades, Rowan said softly. Be careful.
Walls don't like cracks.
Mara didn't answer. She didn't have the energy. She only nodded once, then walked to her car like her legs belonged to someone else. At the daycare, Juniper came running wobbly, fast, determined arms lifted like Mara was the sun.
Mama!
Juniper shouted. Mara dropped to her knees and caught her, holding her so tight Juniper squealed and then laughed, delighted. Mara buried her face in Juniper's hair and felt the smell of her soap and crackers and warmth, and for the first time in weeks, Mara felt her lungs fill all the way.
We going home, Mara whispered.
Juniper patted Mara's cheek, then traced her own birthmark with a curious finger like she always did when she was thinking. Mara kissed that finger.
Yeah, Mara whispered. We going home.
The weeks after the hearing didn't turn into instant victory. Real life doesn't do instant victories. It does paperwork and interviews and slow consequences. But the direction changed. The hospital's HR emails stopped being aggressive and started being cautious. Denise Harrow avoided Mara entirely, like eye contact could become evidence. The fitness evaluation quietly evaporated, replaced by a neutral statement about support resources that nobody mentioned again. Eamon Pike's suspension was reviewed. He didn't get an apology. Institutions rarely apologize, but he got reinstated. The kind of reinstatement that said, we miscalculated how many eyes were watching. Gloria Vance received anonymous calls. She reported them. Orson filed them. The protective order made the intimidation more dangerous for the intimidators. And the concerned relative petition. Arden Hartwell's polished performance began to look less like a rescue plan and more like what it had always been, a cleanup crew. Court-ordered audits uncovered irregular access to records. Not a smoking gun in one day, but a pattern. Enough to make the judge's patience thin. Enough to make the county prosecutor start asking questions that donors couldn't silence with gala checks.
Celeste Hartwell underwent another DNA test.
It matched. Then she did something nobody expected. She didn't file to rip Juniper away. She filed to support Mara's guardianship, requesting only structured, supervised visits at first, handled gently, on a schedule designed to protect the child's emotional safety. In her filing, Celeste wrote one sentence that Mara read alone in her apartment and had to sit down afterward because her knees went weak. "I do not want my daughter rescued into another cage. I want her loved in daylight." Mara stared at the sentence for a long time. Then she printed it and filed it in her folder, not as ammunition, but as proof that even broken people could choose better when given the chance. The first time Celeste met Juniper, it happened quietly, no cameras, no courthouse steps, no headlines. A supervised family center room with toys and soft chairs and a large window that let in gentle light. Orson insisted on structure. Jessa insisted on a child-focused approach. Mara insisted on one thing, Juniper's pace. Celeste walked in and stopped like she'd been hit in the chest. Juniper stood near Mara's knee, holding a stuffed rabbit. Celeste's eyes filled instantly, not with performance but with shock, the shock of seeing a life you were told didn't exist. Juniper stared back, curious, not afraid. Children recognize fear differently than adults do. Juniper wasn't scared of Celeste. She was simply trying to understand her shape in the room.
Celeste knelt slowly, keeping distance. "Hi," Celeste whispered, voice trembling.
Juniper tilted her head. Celeste's gaze dropped to the spiral mark, and her hand lifted involuntarily toward her own cheek, as if remembering the mirror. Juniper watched the motion, then touched her own birthmark again, thoughtful. Mara's chest tightened so hard it hurt. Celeste didn't reach for Juniper. She didn't grab. She didn't claim. She stayed still, letting Juniper decide. After a long minute, Juniper took a cautious step forward and offered the stuffed rabbit like a peace treaty. Celeste covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling. "Thank you," she whispered. Juniper blinked, then smiled a simple, unburdened smile and toddled back to Mara's side like she'd completed her inspection. Mara didn't move. She didn't breathe. Celeste looked up at Mara, eyes raw. "I won't hurt her," Celeste whispered. "I won't take her from you.
I am not here to rewrite what you built."
Mara's voice was quiet, steady, exhausted. "Then don't," she said. "Just be someone safe." Celeste nodded hard. "I will," she whispered. And in that room, with a child holding a rabbit and two women holding different kinds of grief, something shifted, not into a perfect ending, but into a possible one. Time didn't erase the past. It did something harder. It forced the town to live with it. Cedar Ridge didn't throw a parade for Mara. People didn't suddenly become saints. Some still whispered. Some still refused to admit they'd believed the smear. But the tone changed. Because the story could no longer be kept neat. There was a judge's order. There was a verified DNA match. There were audits. There were reports. There was a woman named Celeste Hartwell who had finally spoken in public record. And there was a child named Juniper who was not a rumor.
Juniper grew, as children do fast, stupborn, shining.
She started preschool. She learned to talk back politely. She insisted on choosing her own shoes. She asked questions that made adults pause. One day she asked Mara, pointing to her cheek, "Why swirl?" Mara knelt beside her and touched the mark gently, not like it was fragile, but like it was hers. "It's your mark," Mara said. "It's part of you." Juniper frowned. "But..." Mara's eyes burned. She shook her head firmly. "No," Mara said. "Not bad. Just yours." Juniper thought for a moment, then nodded like she accepted it as a fact. "Okay," she said, and ran off like the world had no power over her. Mara watched her go and felt tears rise, not of sadness this time, but of relief so deep it felt like grief leaving. Because the biggest win wasn't the court order. It was this: Juniper moved through life like she belonged in it. On a spring morning a year later, Mara walked into Wexler County Hospital for her shift and passed the lobby plaque that listed donors and founders. The Hartwell name was still there because stone doesn't erase itself easily. But now, when Mara walked past it, she didn't feel small. She felt clear. She knew what the plaque meant: money had built walls. And she knew what she meant: love had found the cracks. Eamon Pike met her in the hallway with 2 coffees. He offered one without making a big deal of it. Mara took it, surprised. "You still do this," she murmured.
Eamon shrugged.
"It's coffee," he said. Mara looked at him. "It's more than coffee," she said quietly. Eamon's mouth curved faintly. "Yeah," he admitted. "It is." They stood there for a moment, 2 tired people who had walked through a fight neither of them asked for and came out still standing.
Mara exhaled slowly.
"Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. Eamon's eyes went distant. "Every time I hear a newborn cry," he said. Mara nodded. "Me too," she whispered. Then Mara straightened her shoulders and walked toward her unit, her badge swinging against her chest, her steps steady. Because the truth was no longer trapped in a nursery behind glass. The truth had a name now.
Juniper.
And nobody, no matter how powerful, could make her disappear again without the whole world seeing the violence in it.